Chapter 689. In a trance, Gwashuk seemed to see a fleeting illusion from the steam rising from the pot. In the illusion, there was a yellow and white dog squatting alone on the road. When it looked back, tears appeared in its eyes. "Don't kill me, please don't kill me. What did I do wrong to be tortured by you? Why are you doing this to me?" That innocent and resentful voice resounded in his ears, making him feel the bitterness. The soft rice in his mouth and the fish in the pot suddenly didn't taste good. The happiness belonged to others, and he had nothing. Gwashuk's chewing paused for a moment, and the ivory chopsticks trembled slightly. At this moment, he actually felt an unprecedented loneliness. At this moment, for some reason, all the people in the audience had a strange illusion. He was like a dog, so lowly. As the taste gradually turned from strong to bitter, Gwashuk raised his head and experienced this novel taste. So lowly that it's not even worth mentioning. "Miss YG, your malice is really delicious." He raised his head and threw a big spoonful of fish and soft rice into his bottomless throat. Gwashuk grinned and laughed heartily. Even if it's dog food, it's still sweet. Behind him, his white hair moved without wind, and a thick darkness slowly rose, turning into a violent flame that rose wantonly. A terrifying aura spread out from his body. It turned the entire arena into a literal hell. Just the sole radiation of this person was enough to break the seal of the realm and form such a terrible pollution. Such a terrifying calamity and accumulation had completely exceeded their expectations. Weisher was dumbfounded. He had never seen such a scary single dog. It was just eating dog food, right? Why was it so sour? Fortunately, he didn't take out the bag he earned on the night of the witch. Otherwise, wouldn't this old man explode on the spot? There was also the cost of a stone marrow haul and the small amount of money he had on his card, as well as his own corrupted character. It was really too scary. Now, under the stimulation of this sense of lowliness and anger, Gwashuk opened his mouth and burst out with endless appetite and strength. Under the stimulation of the malicious intent, an even greater malicious intent was born. Everything on the table was swept clean. As if it wasn't enough, it picked up the plate and pot, stretched out its extremely long tongue, and sucked away the last drop of soup. Carefree, beaming with joy. "How does it taste?" Weisher asked as he looked at his violent state. "Wonderful. Unfortunately, it's still not enough." Gwashuk raised his hand and wiped the corner of his mouth. He licked the remaining bloody taste in his mouth and sucked his own blood with relish. While Yu Yun was still savoring the aftertaste, he suddenly said, "Miss Huai-ji, do you know what the core of an abyss chef is? What is it that makes the culinary demons unique in the abyss and allows us to form such a huge organization, standing side by side with the calamity musicians, doomsday painters, and dark barbers at the top of the cemetery of the returnless?" Weisher was stunned. He didn't think that he would ask this question. He also realized that he had never thought about it before. "Are you trying to say that the endless desire for good food and human desire has contributed to all of this? That's just the source, just the inducement. What kind of path leads from this? What kind of results are obtained? What kind of essence did you obtain?" Gwashuk's violence gradually calmed down, and a mysterious smile appeared on the middle-aged face. He asked and answered his own question, whether it's the Muse Club, the Hell Music Association, the Culinary Demon Organizing Committee, or the Barbers Association. What they represent and are proficient in is one of the greatest essences among the countless hells and disasters. The Doomsday painter of the Muse Club pursued the eternal and unchanging beauty of hell. Thus, he extended the art of sealing fleeting calamities and sceneries into a scroll, maintaining the art of eternity. What the calamity musicians focused on was the essence of change and movement. Therefore, they were good at weaving and catalyzing. They used movements to unify countless calamities into a whole, causing them to produce incredible transformations. The barbers are different from the musicians. They're like gardeners taking care of the nursery, pruning disasters and miracles. They don't pay attention to integration and unification, but focus on the independence and harmony of each disaster and miracle. They correct the shortcomings and make it as close to its original pure state as possible. Finally, there's the infernal culinary demon. Guashuk crossed his fingers and smiled happily. All the culinary demon skills are highly similar to alchemy. This is not without reason, because what we pursue is to completely smelt malice and curses, to achieve transformation from furnace fire and cauldron, to complete this pure eruption. There was an instant of silence. It was as if a thunderbolt had flashed across Huai Shi's mind. The fleeting electric light illuminated the original chaos, making everything suddenly clear. Constancy, change, harmony, and eruption. This was the essence of the Doomsday painters, the calamity musicians, the barbers, and the culinary demons. Before this, Huai Shi had only used it subconsciously, but he had never thought of such a profound place. Not only Guashuk, but even the culinary demons below the stage had never heard such a high-level summary and answer. For a moment, they all showed an expression of disbelief. At the same time, they became more and more suspicious. They didn't know why Guashuk suddenly brought up this topic, and they didn't know what he was up to. Miss Huai Shi, I have to say, you are indeed a rare talent. This is just an instinctive use, and you can already achieve such an exaggerated result. It's really amazing. Guashuk propped himself up with both hands and slowly got up. He raised his cracked face, and his smile was so gratifying that it was frightening. I sincerely feel joy. Huai Shi was silent. Once again, he felt a sense of crisis, but he didn't know where he had overlooked. Unfortunately, your delaying tactics won't work anymore. Guashuk grinned, reached out, and turned on the gas under the bamboo basket. The fire rose, illuminating his gloomy face. I've found it, your fatal weakness. Huai Shi instantly froze on the spot. For a moment, he actually had a sense of panic, as if he had taken a loan to buy a house, and someone had found out that he didn't live on the subsistence allowance. But soon after, this strange illusion had already dissipated, and what rose in his heart was 100% vigilance. This kind of opponent who had no limits, it was not impossible for him to use any kind of move. He had to concentrate. Stay calm. What weakness? Miss Huai Shi raised her hand and pulled her long hair behind her shoulder. She smiled casually. Do I still have a weakness? In fact, he was panicking. Damn it, this old bastard couldn't have found out about his cross-dressing from Hooper, right? At the thought of his imminent social death, Huai Shi's face under the disguise became as muddy and panicked. Guashuk just raised his hand, took out a stack of yellow paper full of writing from his pocket, and casually stuffed it into the fire under the stove. The sacred and austere handwriting instantly burned with the yellow paper, leaving no ashes behind. It was as if the handwriting had reached the sky along with the burning flames in an instant. Huai Shi frowned. He didn't know what it was. You've heard of it, right, Miss Huai Shi? Guashuk said with a smile. This is the authentic handwriting I took from the Dongsha Museum before I left. It's also one of the necessary prerequisites for the next work. It's like officially reporting to the heavens that you're an enemy. From your personality, behavior, and even your past history are all negated and degraded. It's calculated to find every weakness and opportunity you can take advantage of, magnifying and distorting them. But in the end, it's just to accuse you of a crime and find a justification for killing you next. Guashuk said calmly, Here, we're just going through the process to show our solemnity. At that moment, the strong smell of spices rose from the bamboo basket, as if thousands of pounds of spices were burning in countless copper cauldrons. An extremely luxurious and solemn atmosphere spread out. What followed was an indescribable majestic presence and a deep temptation. In the deepest part of the bamboo basket, something was slowly brewing, completing the final step of the process. Finally, as the bamboo basket was opened, a bright golden light burst out from it. It was a pig's head. Sure enough, Huai Shi's pupils contracted, and his heart sank to the bottom. Such a formal ceremony was no longer within the scope of the Shaolin prison. It was probably what he had always been most afraid of. Prison. At that moment, Guashuk put his palms together and made a crisp sound, breaking the dead silence on the field. "Please, Miss Huaishur," he said. "This is today's first dish, special pig. Is it really prison?" Huaishur asked seriously. "Of course, the cow is the first, the sheep is the second, and the pig is the third. Today, in order to defeat you, there are only these 3 dishes." Guoshuk laughed strangely. "In other words, if you're still safe and sound after eating, it's my loss." Just like how he had provoked many cookery demons, he set down a decisive rule that was unfavorable to himself without any hesitation. In other words, he had full confidence. Within these 3 dishes, he would completely defeat Huaishur. "I'm afraid this is not just special pig, right?" Huaishur closed his eyes and carefully sniffed the smell in the air. From the solemn and heavy fragrance, he distinguished a different smell. It was the smell of alcohol. The smell of alcohol? "Yes, I used alcohol." Guoshuk's hands did not stop, and he prepared the next dipping sauces and dipping sauces for Huaishur. After all, it's an old dish. In the Zhou dynasty, there wasn't even oil, chicken essence, and chili. The taste must not be very good. Today, it must be changed to adapt to the times. "I'm afraid it's not just that." Huaishur sneered. That wisp of alcohol fragrance was the most important thing, the most threatening thing. From it, Huaishur actually distinguished the faintly discernible smell of plants. The moment he picked up his chopsticks, the alcohol fragrance became clearer, lingering at the tip of his nose and in his soul, quickly spreading. What kind of alcohol was this? Huaishur could not tell. "Brassica." Guoshuk smiled happily, watching the movement of picking up his chopsticks, and whispered softly, "This is a peerless wine purified by brassica." In that instant, Huaishur saw it. It was not a perilous peak, nor was it a cliff, nor was it a snake, insect, tiger, or leopard. At this moment, what appeared in front of him was a bright golden light. There was no obstruction. What he saw was a great path to the heavens. A smooth path. Chapter 690. It was effortless, and he did not encounter any obstacles at all. The distance that was difficult to cross in other people's eyes did not exist for Huaishur. He did not even need to take a step, and the finish line came to him automatically. They were afraid that he would be tired, afraid that he would feel bored. They did not condescend to him at all. Instead, they came in front of him attentively like a dog and presented him with a tame delicacy. Huaishur's chopsticks had already landed on the pig's ear. With a light pluck, the thick meat and cartilage fell off and landed in his hand. It was like picking a fruit from a tree. A strange fragrance assailed his nostrils. After passing through the water in the plate, it fell into his mouth. The chewy pig's ear made crunching sounds as he chewed. The mellow and fragrant meat taste spread, filling his mouth and lungs. He felt like he was immersed in warm water, and he felt an unprecedented satisfaction. However, he was not tired at all, because the clear and refreshing wine fragrance complemented the thick meat taste, sweeping away the grease that made his stomach uncomfortable. At the same time, Huaishur's appetite was greatly stimulated. Another mouthful. This was really a peerless delicacy. He had never eaten such good food, never enjoyed such honor, and never had such great power. It was just like a god. At that moment, Huaishur's movements paused, and a sentence suddenly appeared in his mind. "Ergin's brassica is not allowed, and the emperor's offering is not allowed. There is no way to shrink the wine, and I am the conqueror. The brassica's brassica is not paid, and the emperor's offering cannot be carried out. There is no material to purify the holy wine, so I am the conqueror. Duke Huan is the reason for attacking Chu." These were words that Huaishur had never memorized with his level of education, but at this moment, they naturally appeared in his mind. "You finally remember, Miss Huaishur." Guoshuk looked down at her stunned expression, and his smile became more and more ferocious. "Brassica's brassica is a necessary step before the holy wine is offered to the gods. This is a top delicacy that only demigods like the Emperor of Zhou have the right to enjoy. Are you happy now?" Huaishur couldn't stop anymore. He was eating like a madman, without the slightest elegance as he gnawed away at the specialties in front of him like a whirlwind, enjoying the endless power and the indescribably wonderful wine fragrance. It was as if he could see himself standing high in the sky, being worshipped by millions of people. Countless pious praises and prayers echoed in his ears. His consciousness and voice covered the 9 planes of the heavens and the 9 planes of the earth, solemnly and majestically operating on this land. Young Master Ming's St. Mark was shaking violently. The trace of divinity hidden within absorbed the solemn offerings and sacrifices and began to grow rapidly. Some kind of cold and enormous aura rose from the depths of Huaishi's soul, corroding it bit by bit. Destroy his humanity. When a divinity sprouted and grew rapidly and crossed the boundary that Huaishi could control, it triggered a fatal loss of control. It began to turn around and dilute Huaishi's soul and consciousness, eating away at humanity, bit by bit, turning him into the afterimage of a god. Just like how an excessively large disaster would make people freeze, this divinity that was too heavy and beyond the limits of Huaishi's control was about to crush him. Have you finally realized? Guoshuk's fingers tapped on the table, looking at Huaishi, who was struggling. He smiled and told him word by word. Miss Huaishi, from the first time I saw you, I realized how pure a miracle is hidden in your soul. That strand of precious light was like the sun. To the cooking demon of the Iya faction, you are the one who is truly a rare talent. Speaking up to here, the cooking demon who liked to use people as ingredients the most opened his eyes wide, unable to hide his excitement. The Grand Prison is nothing at all. You are the work that I have spent so much effort to complete. In the deathly silent arena, apart from Huaishi's labored breathing, there was no other noise. It wasn't until now that the truth had been revealed that the sinister scheme hidden beneath this match was finally revealed. At this moment, the 2 sides in the duel. One wanted to break the balance in his opponent's body at all costs, causing the disaster to backfire and make him fall into hell. The other person, on the other hand, wanted to put his opponent on the altar. For humans, there was no difference between these 2 results. Becoming a demon or a god, completely freezing or completely evaporating, was no different to a human soul. It was an unstoppable mutation. It also represented the tragic future of losing oneself and becoming a walking corpse. Huaishi was very clear about this. But he couldn't stop at all. Instead, he sped up. The solemn aura of a god descended on his soul, causing his consciousness to quickly evaporate, his memories to burn, and quickly evaporate. Everything that belonged to Huaishi was quickly disintegrated and thinned out. But in his soul, the pages of the Book of Destiny were constantly flipping. It continuously maintained Huaishi's consciousness and the integrity of all his memories. It was like a deletion and input competition. Every time a line of divinity was erased, the Book of Destiny would rewrite that line, quickly filling up Huaishi's personality and history. The remains of the kingdom of heaven firmly protected the flickering humanity like a candle in the wind, so that it would not be extinguished under the solemn divinity. And that huge portion of divinity that had been completed was solemnly operating in Huaishi's soul, stripping away all the weakness and emotions of a human. In the end, what remained was an inhumanly clear piece of transparency. Huaishi's eyes shot out a majestic light. There was no sadness or joy. It was only at this moment that he realized he had lost emotions, anger, love, sadness, compassion, and hatred. The weapon that was sleeping in his soul had long disappeared without a trace, because its source no longer existed in Huaishi's consciousness. At this moment, he had been sublimated into a demigod who looked down on the mortal world. Even if it was just the moon in the mirror, a flower in the water, a prosperous bubble. In front of him, Guoshuk smiled benevolently, put his hands together, and offered his own praise and prayers. It was as if he sincerely hoped that Huaishi would be fine. Soon, you will be completed, Miss Huaishi. He was full of hope and expectation, and said gently, when the time comes, I will offer you offerings. But no matter how gentle his face was, it could not hide the malevolent malice that almost filled the whole hell under that smile. Pleasure, indescribable pleasure. Schadenfreude, adding insult to injury, backstabbing, rumors, betrayal, murder, deceit. All the original darkness of human nature seemed to appear in his dark eyes at this moment, burning vigorously. He said, "Next, it's your turn." Huaisher felt unprecedentedly sober. It was as if he had drunk crow's medicine of regret. He entered a state of mind that was even more mechanized than that, calmly facing everything in front of him. He endured the endless devouring of divinity in the depths of his soul, but it did not matter at all. Even if the impulse of desire had disappeared, there would be no change in the predetermined plan. He knew that he was walking step by step on the road to victory. Since he had suffered an unexpected heavy blow, then in the next round, he would turn the tables around. This round of defeat was definitely not in vain. But through the test, he had obtained valuable information from his opponent. Huaisher stared at the opponent in front of him and asked calmly, "Guoshuk, you are afraid of loneliness, right?" Yes, I'm very afraid." Guoshuk nodded and did not hide anything. "I'm afraid that my skills will be buried in the dust. And I'm even more afraid that I will be forgotten. At my age, I should be able to see through everything, but I'm unexpectedly sinful." The man bathed in the shadow of the abyss opened his mouth, revealing sharp teeth and a twisted smile. "Miss Huaisher, in order to attract attention, in order to prove my strength, in order to make myself a little less lonely, I will do anything. To be able to detect this, your arrogant words are indeed not without purpose. Then what is the next dish? Where did you get the recipe from? What kind of malice did you put into it? And what kind of results will it produce? The next dish? Let me think. Let me have something with enough heat." Huaisher rolled up his sleeves and said calmly, "Give me something that can make people excited." Just like that, a barrel full of fuel was poured into the frying pan. The silver-white liquid was like mercury, so smooth that it could illuminate any detail on the face. In the cold light of the metal, it was impossible to see how much terrifying heat was brewing. It was the metal fuel that had been modified and upgraded by the Grandmaster, the wrath of Ramses that had been reborn. Every drop was a vicious liquid fuel that could burn through bone marrow once contaminated. The heat contained in the frying pan was enough for a fighter jet to rise into the sky and carry out an attack, sweep, and cruise for a very long time. Then, as the viscous paste flowed, pieces of heavy parts and mechanical debris fell into the frying pan. After a layer of viscous medium was hung on them, they looked presentable. The iron that humans absolutely could not use was gently wrapped in sugar coating. When the liquid silver metal fuel began to slowly surge and gradually boil, it was thrown into the frying pan. It ushered in refinement and rebirth. Was this metallurgy or cooking? No one could tell the difference between the two anymore. But when the screeching sound of metal rang out, the stunned Zhou Zhijian gritted his teeth in humiliation. His eyes widened as he stared unblinkingly at the desolate illusion rising from the frying pan. He didn't want to admit it, but he had no choice. This was an industrial cuisine that had already surpassed his own level and entered a completely new stage, a completely new realm, and a completely new path. Within the cold light, a deathly silent illusion of hell slowly appeared. After thousands of years of decline, the Twilight Village once again revealed its crazed outline, infusing the essence of hell into this disaster cuisine. Guoshuk's eyes were illuminated by the light, as if they were sparkling. Wonderful, wonderful. Such a state of depravity is truly intoxicating. He carefully observed Huaisher's appearance and asked with a smile, "But it's just an empty shell, right? Now that you've lost all your emotions, how can you use the techniques you're most proficient at and give your origin substance and will to a soul?" What would happen if he lost his emotions? Wasn't that very simple? In that instant, the corners of Huaisher's mouth seemed to twitch, and a faint smile appeared on his face. As long as he could recreate his emotions, wouldn't it be fine? Chapter 691. At this moment, in front of everyone's eyes, Huaisher reached out and put his right arm, which was wearing a heat-insulating glove, into the boiling oil pot. The red-hot molten iron and the surging metal fuel swallowed his forearm. The terrifying high temperature, which was comparable to that of a furnace, could not destroy Tongi's specially made gloves, nor could it burn Huaishi's metallized right arm. Instead, it provided him with endless heat and steel, waiting for him to come. The moment the hand of confinement was unfolded, the casting began. Under the erosion of divinity, the human nature that had become completely transparent was operating. Huaishi's soul was slowly surging, brewing, and continuously injecting the source substance into the furnace of his arm. Awakening the alchemy fire, he began to forge tens of thousands of times. This had been done tens of thousands of times, and the process was completely imprinted into his instinct. Even if he could no longer feel the emotion of anger, the pure reaction was still engraved in his body and the sacred mark. It still remained in the records of the hand of confinement and the alchemy fire. He only needed to repeat the order step by step. He failed once, then a second time, a third time. In a short period of time, he repeated dozens of times, and then, after all, thousands of times of exploration. Like turning a key, the engine ignited. It repeated endlessly, digging out the remaining traces in the records again and again, until the roaring sound came from the casting furnace. The engine finally started. Huaishi's eyes lit up. The breakthrough from nothing to something was completed in an instant. Something was clenched tightly by the 5 contracted fingers. The first thing that appeared was the outline of the heavy axe blade. The anger stripped from the soul turned into steel, growing little by little in his hand. Then, the anger spread, infecting Huaishi's consciousness in reverse. He was going to return the anger that had originally come from him to him. The phantom pain of the axe slashing burst forth. The pain of shattering came from the depths of the soul. Huaishi's vision turned black, and blood suddenly flowed out of his mouth and nose. The abnormal blood with a bright golden color rose from the air, glowing with a misty light. It illuminated Huaishi's raised face, and that pair of bloodshot eyes that were filled with anger. At this moment, the axe of killing intent in Huaishi's hand condensed once more, returning with fury. After that, it was sorrow, followed by compassion, pain, and even virtue. Finally, it was the curse and hatred offered by the crows. Compared to the noble spirit of the gods, this crystallization produced by humans was so weak and insignificant. But this time, when it returned, it wedged itself firmly into the soul, not allowing the noble spirit of the gods to spread again, forming a sealing cage. With great difficulty, Huaishi's human nature welcomed her return. The altar that had been raised high in the air stopped rising. When that pair of eyes looked up again, the liveliness and joy of the past appeared once more. Now, under his hands, the disasters and records of the Twilight Village were being transformed continuously, injecting massive amounts of despair and endless pain into this narrow dish. From the shell of nothingness between iron and fire, a new hell was constructed. It was not as difficult as he had imagined in the past. It even felt like flowing water. He was familiar with it, and without any pressure, he sprinkled out this inspiration and put it into practice in his hands. This was the crystallization of hell that only the Creator and the imprisoned hand could complete. It was enough to occupy a new height among the industrial cooking demons. There was a round of applause of admiration, not only below the stage, but also from the stage. The person who seemed to be happier, and happier than Huaishi was shook. At this moment, he was full of gratitude and praised the essence of disaster created by Huaishi. You must be happy at this moment, Miss Huaishi. He looked at Huaishi's appearance and murmured with gratification. You must be able to understand the joy that belongs to the cooking demons at this moment, right? Just like farming, choosing the time carefully, paying attention to malice, adjusting disasters, and finally growing fruit from hell. Have you ever experienced this excitement and sense of fulfillment? In the midst of cooking, Huaishi was unaware and did not hear Gua Shuk's exclamation at all. However, on Huaishi's plain face, the corners of his mouth had already curled up slightly. He was smiling. When he was fully focused on cooking, this indescribable sense of fulfillment and gratification spontaneously arose. He was creating something. He was creating something. He was stepping into a new world, moving forward step by step alone. You're growing, Miss Huaishi. At this moment, you're like the rising sun, incomparably dazzling and rapid growth. The old man's eyes shone with excitement. I can see that you can't hide from me. You're taking big strides forward on this path that belongs to us. That's right, as if running, as if flying. No, it was faster than that, and more glorious than that. In this pair of pitch-black eyes filled with the projection of the abyss, a blazing light that slowly rose into the sky was reflected. It almost illuminated him. It dispelled his loneliness. He laughed, clapped, and prayed for her with anticipation from the bottom of his heart. Please hurry up, Miss Huaishi. A little faster. Now, you're about to step into the realm where you can be my enemy. What responded to him was a loud, sorrowful cry. From the boiling, evaporating, instantly burning, and exploding with all the heat from the metal fuel, from the frying pan under Huaishi's hands, the furious flames swept and swallowed everything. Then there was darkness gushing out. An endless amount of viscous darkness gushed out from the frying pan. The crystal called despair was finally reproduced in Huaishi's hands. After an endless period of time, the power from the deepest part of the Twilight Village, entrusted to Huaishi by the King of Smiths, was once again reproduced in the form of casting. At this moment, it was a success. Between the golden and crispy metal explosives, the sticky dark sauce slowly flowed, emitting a numb and desperate sorrowful cry all the time. Hell reappeared here. Its name, Guashuk had stood up at some point. His whole body was lying on the cooking table, and he leaned closer to look at it. Staring at the bitterness on the plate, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. It was a carefree moment. His eyes were already red. What's its name, Miss Huaishi? Please tell me you can give it a name. Huaishi rubbed her fingers nonchalantly. I have no interest in dressing up the painful history. Any name would just be a blasphemy to this pain. Guashuk, since you yearn for disaster so much, then feel the despair and pain as if it were your own. Other than Avicii, I can't think of any name that can compare to it. Guashuk sniffed the endless aftertaste of pain and bitterness and said decisively, born in the frying pan, eternal suffering, numb waiting without relief, it should be called Avicii. There were 8 hells. The first was waiting for life, the second was black rope, the third was pushing, the fourth was screaming, the fifth was great screaming, the sixth was burning, the seventh was great burning, the eighth was Avicii. Avicii was Avicii. In the monk's view, there was no place in the world more terrifying and dark than Avicii. Only those who had committed heinous sins would fall into such a place after death. Their frozen souls would be eternally tormented by endless evil thoughts. Now, Avicii came in front of Guashuk. It opened the door and waited quietly. There was no need for any urging. Under everyone's witness, Guashuk rolled up his sleeves, straightened his collar, and sat upright. Then he picked up the red-hot iron box in front of him, picked up a piece of steel dipped in despair with ivory chopsticks, opened his mouth, and swallowed it into his stomach with a crisp sound. Gulp. It didn't hurt his teeth, as he imagined, and there wasn't even any hard texture. The extremely thin and brittle steel cracked between his lips and teeth, like chocolate chips, bringing an indescribable sweetness and beauty. At that moment, a sharp whistling sound burst out. Guashuk's arm trembled for a moment. On his neck, a huge gap appeared out of thin air, as if he was hit by an invisible axe. The flesh on the wound rolled, and the bones were exposed. His neck almost fell off from his shoulders, but he seemed to be completely fine. He opened his mouth, chewed, and bit the iron piece in his mouth bit by bit. He swallowed it into his stomach. I know, this is the taste of anger. He sighed. Behind the crack on his neck, viscous darkness flowed. Sharp teeth were exposed one after another, and then slowly disappeared into the bottomless shell. It's so cruel, Miss YG. I'm already old. Why do you have to hurt me like this? Gwashuk shook his head helplessly, smiled, picked up the second piece, and put it into his mouth. The wonderful sweetness and bitterness mixed together, bringing a cool, fruity taste, but it was getting colder and colder, more and more numb. It was hard to breathe. His lungs were contracting. Bang! The sound of bones breaking was heard. On his internal organs and limbs, there seemed to be an invisible rope rapidly contracting, cruelly pulling, and ravaging his limbs inch by inch. Then there was compassion. The blade of the fusion of venom and redemption tore through his heart from the inside out, leaving a mark on his chest. His body became more and more broken. But Gwashuk's appearance also became more and more ferocious, more and more inhuman, and more like a monster in the abyss. Every bite was equivalent to bearing Huai Shi's all-out attack from the inside out. It broke out from the most vulnerable part, destroying his body. But what was more dangerous was the curse that spread from it. Endless pain and despair. The purity of this despair had reached a level that ordinary people could not imagine. It was generously feeding and fertilizing the accumulated resentment and curses in his body. This was just the fuse of a chain reaction. With every bite, he could feel the darkness in his body rioting. Countless old wounds slowly cracked open, showing signs of relapse and worsening. Just as Huai Shi said, if the balance was broken, the strong would collapse. When the poison entangled the soul, the balance of the body was broken. Gwashuk had been pushed to the edge of the cliff by Huai Shi. He was only one step away from completely falling into the abyss. Huai Shi stared at Gwashuk in front of him, looking at the bottomless darkness in his eyes. However, he didn't know when he would be able to take this crucial step. Only one step. Chapter 692. Yes, that's right, he was so close. But Gwashuk was like a roly-poly toy, lingering on the edge of collapse. No matter how the wind and waves blew, his body was ravaged, his soul was ravaged, but he still stood strong. You must be very disappointed, right? Gwashuk held the plate and leisurely enjoyed the taste of the curse. As his lips moved, he slowly asked, "Are you in a hurry? Are you anxious? Are you waiting for me to fall? Are you doubting whether I still have consciousness? Are you still pretending to hold on?" As he spoke, cracks kept spreading out from his body, crisscrossing and destroying the foundation of balance. But Gwashuk was still calm, without any change in his expression. He leisurely ate the food on the plate. He was enjoying the eternal pain from Avicii. How many years had it been since he had such a novel and exciting experience? Not only were there cuts and wounds on his body, but there was also the bitterness spreading from the tip of his tongue and the sweetness that was like an illusion. Gwashuk truly tasted the taste of the curse. It was so touching. It was as if, after a long period of drought, there was a good rain from the heavens. His sense of taste and touch that was gradually dying in the decay once again experienced the purest joy in the world, the joy of eating. He had sought out countless famous doctors and used countless methods, but still could not get any treatment or relief. He had been told countless times that there was no cure. His senses were gradually declining, and he was gradually losing the most important thing of the cooking demon. But he never thought that he could taste such a moving delicacy again before his sense of taste was completely destroyed. Compared to it, all the consequences were not worth mentioning. Moreover, do you know about self-digestion, Miss Huaiji? As the knife and axe slashed, Gwashuk slowly put down the empty plate, wiped the corner of his mouth, and suddenly asked. In the momentary silence, Huai Shi's pupils trembled slightly. He saw the phenomenon of self-digestion with his own eyes. Beneath the body that was riddled with holes, the darkness and calamity that were about to seep out of the body were rapidly shrinking. The massive amount of disaster that was entangled in Gwashuk's body and was about to wreak havoc after breaking the balance were rapidly being devoured. By Gwashuk himself, it was no different from using gastric juices to digest his own stomach. At this moment, Gwashuk was devouring these calamities that were beyond his control with terrifying efficiency within his body and turning them all into his own power. It was as if Gwashuk was the true ruler compared to these terrifying creatures. Even though the already abnormal solidification index rose again, it still did not cross the final boundary. It was stuck at the edge of the cliff. This step was like the difference between heaven and earth. "You failed again, Miss Huaiji." Guashuk smiled sympathetically. He raised his finger and gestured her tiny distance to success. "Just a little bit, a little bit. You need to work harder." Huaishur sneered. "But before that, you have to taste the second path first, right?" "Of course." Guashuk solemnly put his palms together and offered a prayer to the pure and glorious divinity in front of him. Then he removed the seal and summoned the calamity. Then he presented the noble sheep's head in the soup pot, which was shrouded in thick fragrance and mist. "I will enjoy myself, I will protect the sheep and cows, and I will protect the heavens." The ceremony is the ceremony of King Wen of Xingwen. King Wen of Xingwen, I will reward you. I fear the might of the heavens all day and night, and I will protect you. The great heavens and gods, we will offer cows and sheep, imitating the ceremony of King Wen of Xingwen. We will revere you all day and night, or we will not dare to forget. Just like that, he hummed the ballad from the dove. Guashuk lowered his head and stared at the sheep's head surrounded by the thick soup and fresh fragrance. This was the essence of the Zhou rites. It was also the boundary between gods and humans. Only the great existence between gods and humans, the descendants of gods, were worthy of such noble sacrifice and worship. "It's time to test your structure and tolerance, Miss Huaiji," Guashuk said. "If the previous special ceremony represented the power and position of the human world, then this is the honor that only the demigods who run the four seas and push the stars can obtain. Those who cannot establish a great achievement cannot enjoy it." "Sound good." Huaishur took a deep breath, picked up the chopsticks, and poked the sheep's head in the soup pot in front of him. Beside his ears, countless praises and respectful voices sounded again. In an instant, the dormant divinity was awakened again. Through the seal of the soul equipment, it operated solemnly and brazenly broke through that layer of boundary. There was no pause or obstruction. Huaishur held this great achievement in his hands. Even Tangi had to admit that this was a rare achievement for her contractor. Even if he had not been able to sublimate, he would definitely be able to leave his name in this world for a long time in other ways, other appearances, and other achievements. Leaving his name in history was not a problem. But the moment the fragrant and tender mutton entered his mouth, Huaishur's movements suddenly stopped and he became stiff. It was because under the illumination of the divinity, endless memories suddenly emerged from the darkness, surged, turned into a raging tide, and swallowed him. That was the countless reincarnations in the Vientiane celestial sphere, the thick history produced by countless restarts of life, enough to destroy any concept, any common sense, and any habit. The records that were originally stripped off as a fake book were returned once again. What it brought was unprecedented confusion and pain. His soul was ignited by the divinity, burning vigorously, and blazing light gushed out from his eyes. Whispers rose and fell one after another in Huaishur's consciousness, occupying everything. "How many roads do I have to walk to become a real man? I am the king of kings, with unparalleled achievements. I dare to make the heavens submit. I want to live a happy life. Kill them all, leave no one alive." In an instant, this divinity that was rapidly growing under the sacrifice of sacrifice had already restored this record of nothingness, overlapping in Huaishur's narrow body. Countless illusory branches of events surged into the records of the Book of Destiny, almost completely destroying the chapter called Huaishur. Content that could not be completed even if 100,000 words, 1,000,000 words, 10 million words were written in an instant. Following the call of this divinity, it established the limits of human achievements. In just an instant, 10,000 times the memory diluted the existence called Huaishur into countless silhouettes, becoming an extension of the divinity, just like the incarnation of God in the human world. Huaishur's body became not worth mentioning. But in this painful trance, he actually had a strange illusion. He seemed to be able to look down on everything. When he raised his eyes, He could see through all the obstacles and see the world that was operating with a bang. Countless huge modules that could not be seen with the naked eye were operating like stars. When they collided with each other, loud sounds like landslides and thunder burst forth. Waves swept across, enveloping the entire mortal world. He understood the essence of this world so clearly. He was so close to the truth. He was so gratified by the world thousands of years later. Everything was orderly and clear. The three major seals were as stable as before. This world was stable and unshakable. How beautiful! He was attracted by the divinity, and once again began to climb unconsciously until another voice sounded in his ears. You can't go any further. Someone intimately wrapped her arms around his neck from behind. Her arms were fair and slender. When she raised her eyes, there was a mischievous smile on her face. You're still young, why sure? It's still too early to understand the affairs of adults. She lowered her face and whispered in his ear. So, welfare and whatnot, we'll talk about it later. She raised her palm and snapped her fingers in front of the day's Huai Sure. Snap! There was a soft sound. In a shadow under Huai Shure's feet, the reflection called Huai Ji Suzy opened her eyes, and her eyes glowed with endless light. A brilliant light will slowly rose behind her head. The substitute that she had been operating for a long time finally came in handy at this moment. The empty shell of nothingness replaced Huai Shure and became the vessel of this divinity. Those imaginary memories and branches of things that did not exist instantly went far away, and all the trance and illusions dissipated. What replaced it was a solemn light wheel that slowly formed behind Huai Ji Suzy's head in the reflection, like a solemn and dignified scene of a Buddha. This divinity that was beyond the limit of control emitted terrifying flames at all times, and through the existence of the substitute, it imposed a burning pain on Huai Shure's soul. The distance was too close. If it was not for the fixation of the soul equipment, his soul would have been instantly destroyed like dust, right? After Huai Shure finally woke up from the chaotic vortex of memories, he saw the empty soup pot in front of him. In the unconscious Tao Dai, there was not even a drop of soup left. Only a pale skeleton with a goat's head was left. And as the prize for receiving the offerings, the origin substance had almost been burned dry. The sacred mark was sluggish, and there was no reaction. The bone-burying sanctuary was disturbed uneasily, and the darkness became thinner than ever. The steel crows still did not know what had happened, and each of them lay sickly in the cage of dreams. Even the sacred mark's voice had become uneven and weak. Fortunately, there was still the barrier and protection of the cage of dreams. They did not have Huai Shure's resistance to divinity, and even a slight diversion would almost completely purify them. He could feel how dangerous his current situation was. If it was not for the substitute Huai Ji Suzy, he would have lost all consciousness long ago. After the primary and secondary were reversed, he would have become an extension of this divinity. Soul, sacred mark, body, and even a large group. Now Huai Shure had been pushed to the edge of a cliff by Guashuk. He was only one step away from death. You must be very disappointed, right? When he raised his head again, Huai Shure looked at Guashuk, smiled, and returned the same words. Finally, an unprecedented look of astonishment could be seen in that pair of pitch-black eyes. His hands that were about to put together stiffened in the air for a moment, and he was unable to offer a sincere salute to his most perfect creation. Guashuk was stunned in place. The plan had gone wrong, and the expectations had deviated. It was completely different from what he had imagined. The domain of the junior prison had been broken, and now Huai Shure had officially stepped into the domain of the grand prison. There was only one last challenge left. But no matter what, it was hard to understand how Huai Shure could maintain his humanity in front of the grand prison that had been passed down for thousands of years. How could a level 3 ascendant maintain himself under the operation of such a huge amount of divinity? Everything was too illogical. It was extremely abnormal. At the same time, it also made him extremely excited. It was as if he had witnessed the Kuan Peng break through the sea and rise with the wind. His excitement was indescribable. At that moment, In front of the two completely different cliffs, the two people wrestling with each other caught a glimpse of the blazing flames in each other's eyes. The final round was about to begin. Chapter 693. At this moment, the arena was dead silent. Everyone held their breaths and stared at the two people on the stage. Who would have the last laugh when they were at the end of their rope? "Can you still move, Miss Huaiji?" Guoshuk asked first, examining Huaishi's pale face. "Can you still stand up? Do you still have a confidence to win?" Of course, Huaishi replied with the words of the past. "Who would be fooled by your strong appearance? Even if you're strong on the outside but weak on the inside, you're still the same, right?" Guoshuk shook his head in understanding. "The battle between the chef and demon is very cruel. Miss Huaiji, even if you know my weakness and successfully force me to the weakest point, do you still have the strength to make dishes? Do you still have enough strength to defeat me?" It was just as he said. Huaishi had reached his limit. After making 2 dishes that exceeded his standard and being suppressed and eroded by 2 Daos, the divinity of his young arbiter of life had swelled to the verge of collapse. If he didn't find a chance to rest and wait for this baseless miracle to gradually dissipate, Huaishi's ego would probably be dissolved by the divinity represented by Huaiji and completely disappear from this world. The cruelty of the battle between the chef and demon lay in this. When you saw the hope of the end, you might have already exhausted your strength in the long run and be unable to cross the final cruel distance. He quietly fell into the darkness. But the premise of this assumption was that Huaishi really exhausted his strength and couldn't get up again, falling in front of the end. He had waited for so long, racked his brains, and put in so much effort. Wasn't it just for the moment when he was closest to victory? How could it end here? At that moment, Miss Huaiji raised her eyes, and her smile became playful and happy. "It doesn't matter," she said. "I don't need to do anything anymore." Because the final dish had already been placed on the stove when the competition had just started. At this moment, behind Huaishi, on the cooking table, there was a pot of water that had been added since the start of the competition. It was simmering over the fire, and a low boiling sound could be heard. Hot steam slowly rose from the pot lid and filled the air. However, there wasn't any expected aroma. It was plain and moist, filling the tip of his nose. Everyone's spirits were lifted and their curiosity was piqued. The final product was completed. This was Huaishi's plan from the very beginning. He hit in Guoshuk's blind spot and finally delivered a fatal blow to the enemy. The last straw was enough to break the camel's back. Everything that happened before was just for this moment. This time, when Huaishi propped himself up and lifted the lid of the pot, no glaring light gushed out from within. Only the moist heat brought about waves of subtle warmth. There wasn't the slightest hint of smell, nor was there the slightest hint of mysticism. It was just a pot of boiling water. Everyone subconsciously stood up and looked carefully. However, no matter how they looked, they could only come to one conclusion. There were no condiments, no processing, and no changes. It was like a pot of boiled water. Now, the water in the pot was almost boiled. There was only a large bowl left. When it was poured into the bowl in front of Guoshuk, his cracked face revealed an indescribable blankness and dullness. Immediately, he felt an unprecedented absurdity. "What is this?" Guoshuk's shoulders shook. He laughed, revealing his broken teeth. "Is your so-called fatal blow this pot of boiled water? No, you can also say it's this old man's favorite boiled cabbage. Sorry, there's no cabbage in the ingredients." Huaishi reached out and picked up the soup dumpling that was still emitting a scalding heat from the bottom of the pot. He weighed it in his hand and threw it on the table. A crisp and heavy sound was heard. It was like heavy objects colliding. The soup dumpling filter bag's opening was disconnected, and the hidden materials inside rolled out. They had beautiful or simple textures, rolling on the smooth table, revealing their appearance. "Stones. See?" Huaishi smiled. "At best, it's just a few stones. Don't take it to heart." This was the decisive dish of Huaishi. Stones and boiled water, a pot of soup made of stones. In the long silence, Guoshuk did not speak. He did not even show any displeasure or anger. He just reached out and picked up the bowl of boiling water that had boiled stones. He sniffed the heat carefully, and the omen of uneasiness in his heart became stronger and stronger. I'm afraid it's not just stones, right? He stared at the hot water in the bowl. His dark pupils contracted slightly, and his expression became meaningful. Drinking more boiled water is good for the body, isn't it? Huaishur sat opposite him, stared into his eyes, and told him solemnly, Guashuk, this is the last work I've made for you. Now, it's your turn. Guashuk lowered his eyes and did not hesitate anymore. He picked up the bowl and swallowed the hot water in it, not afraid of the scalding temperature. But what was surprising was that the hot water, which had just boiled not long ago, did not seem hot at all after entering the mouth, nor was it ice cold. Instead, it had a comfortable warmth. The curling heat spread from the mouth to the nasal cavity, and the breathing was smooth in an instant. He felt refreshed. However, the taste was exactly the same as he had expected. It was bland and tasteless. It was clearly just a bowl of boiling water. How could there be any other taste? But when he swallowed it for the second time, a strange taste emerged from the bland taste. It was a little bit, but the taste was too thin to distinguish. It just felt so familiar. Was it the taste of stones? Was it the taste of boiling water? Or was it something else? He paused for a moment to distinguish carefully, but he could not find the origin of the taste between the slight bitterness of the stones and the blandness of the boiling water. It was as if the taste came from himself. It is said that a long, long time ago, on the opposite side of the kitchen table, Huaishur picked up the stone used for stewing soup on the table and examined the fine lines on it. She softly said, An old monk brought 3 young monks to a small town. The old monk's name was Zhao Kong, and the young monk's name was Fu Lushou. They crossed the mountains and came here. They were hungry, thirsty, and hungry, but everyone in the town closed their doors. It was cold and bleak, and no one was willing to give alms. Then the old monk said to the young monk, Go and tell these kind people that we are newcomers and have nothing. We can only cook a pot of stone soup as a gift for everyone. Everyone was very curious about how Stone was going to cook the soup, so everyone crowded around the place. They saw the old monk light the firewood, throw the stone into the water jar, and boil the water. Huaishur's gaze rose from the stone and fell on Guashuk's face. At this time, the old monk said that it was a pity that there was no salt, otherwise the stone soup would be more delicious. At this time, some busybodies volunteered to take out their own salt. No one said anything. There was no need to say more about the plot of the story. If there was no salt, add salt. If there was no pepper, add pepper. If it felt better to have meat, why not throw it in? Everyone in the town contributed an insignificant portion to this pot of stone soup. In the end, everyone tasted a wonderful taste that had never been used before. Stone has no value, Guashuk. Huaishur announced in a low voice. You have to put in the ingredients of this soup yourself. Now, please put in something that can defeat you into this empty stone soup. With the purest stone and water as the ingredients. After a long night of thinking, countless attempts and practice in the Book of Destiny, he finally completed this pot of pure stone soup. This was Huaishur's decisive work. It didn't matter if it was bland and tasteless. Everything had to be experienced from nothing. After a long time of boiling, Huaishur had pushed the stone to the top of the mountain. As long as something was accidentally put in and broke the fragile balance, the stone would roll down from the top of the mountain with an unstoppable roar and smash everything. In the moment of curiosity, the following development was already determined. No matter what was put in, it would reach the destination that Huaishur had carefully set. In the end, what Guashuk obtained from it was the most distant, thinnest, and cruelest miracle in the world. It was the thing that Huaishur had spent 18 years painstakingly pursuing, the thing that he had been searching for since he was born, but he still couldn't grasp and possess. The illusion of happiness. In the blink of an eye, the bland stone soup in his mouth was stained with the color of memories. At the edge of the cliff of hell, Guashuk was unprecedentedly weak. He had lost the resistance to this guidance. The stone soup in his mouth was rapidly changing, becoming cold. In the end, it turned into an unexpected poison and slid down his throat. This familiar tingling and shock pulled him back along with time and fell into the deepest part of his memories. He returned to the time when he thought he was the closest to perfection and the most powerful. He returned to the day when he was completely defeated by his own student. The work that he was most proud of was mercilessly defeated by him, who had used all his skills, from cold dishes to platters, from soup pots to roasts, from inside the game to outside the dish. When his most trusted student blew the horn of rebellion, he ushered in defeat when he was at his strongest. Since when did that child grow up to be an adult? He felt puzzled from the bottom of his heart. Since when did that child's means of game surpass his own? Was it because of aging? Or was it because of his laziness? None of them were right. It was only because that child was stronger than he had imagined. That was all. At this moment, Gwashuk's fate as the cooking demon Iya ushered in the end. Now, the cooking demon, who had unknowingly turned from a teenager to a man, thought of Gwashuk, who was on the verge of death, and walked over step by step. He knelt on the ground, lowered his head, and bowed to him. He was grateful from the bottom of his heart. "Thank you for taking care of me for so many years, teacher. Thank you for teaching me everything, and thank you for trusting me," he said softly. "But I don't want to follow your arrangements and become the cooking demon anymore." When he raised his head, his eyes were filled with unprecedented vigor. He solemnly told the old man in front of him, "Other than cooking, because there are more important things to do in this world." Just looking at that naive expression, Gwashuk couldn't help but feel sad for him from the bottom of his heart, for his naivety and also for his own weakness. Didn't he know that as long as he was alive, he would never be able to avoid the fate of being the cooking demon Iya? "Stupid, too stupid. I will take revenge on you at all costs, idiot." He widened his eyes and used all his strength to angrily rebuke. "Do you want people to know that you are a student of the evil Taoist like Gwashuk? Why?" he asked angrily. "Why don't you kill me?" In the long silence, only the sound of the rain outside the house could be heard. That man just knelt on the ground and looked at him quietly. His smile gradually became gentle. "Do you still need to ask, teacher?" He bent down and hugged the old man in front of him without any defense. Even if he was hiding his final attack, he had to tell him the answer. "Because compared to cooking, compared to everything in this world, I respect and love you more." What kind of stupid words were that? It would only make people laugh. Are you really a student of mine? Are you really the cooking demon Iya? At that moment, countless dark and vicious words appeared in his mind, along with anger. He couldn't use words to criticize his comical and laughable behavior, nor could he correct his student's naivety and stupidity. But now, at this moment, even just thinking about it, Gwashuk couldn't help but want to smile. Happiness. If there was a moment when he had obtained happiness, it must have been at that moment, right? When he was hugged by that child, he actually felt that even failure was no longer important. When he was sure that his respect and love came from the bottom of his heart, what he experienced was supreme joy and happiness. Why did even he become so stupid? Gwashuk didn't know, but just the memory made him feel fulfilled. It made him understand what the so-called happiness was, and he couldn't give it up. He was intoxicated in this fleeting and indescribable sweetness, and he didn't want to wake up again. Again and again, he lingered, even if it dissipated so quickly, and when it left, it became so cold, until the last wisp of warmth fell into his throat. This short dream completely dissipated. Gwashuk lowered his head in a daze and stared at the empty bottom of the bowl, as if he was petrified. In the dead silence, only the murky water droplets fell into it. It made a faint echo. On the stands, everyone was frozen in place, and they stared hard with their eyes wide open. They couldn't believe what they saw, and they couldn't believe it, until the stooped old man finally raised his face, revealing the embarrassing wet marks on his cheeks. Tears. Chapter 694. It was as if, all of a sudden, the sky had fallen and the earth had cracked. In this almost frozen air, everyone widened their eyes in horror, staring at the face that was streaked by tears. Murky tears fell from the cheeks, drop by drop, falling into the empty bowl. Guashuk shed tears. Because of the departure of happiness, he cried bitterly, mourned, and wailed loudly. That happiness was too cruel, causing the darkness and calamity to freeze, shrinking and withering under the sorrow. In the dead silence, only the sound of shattering could be heard. From his face to his body, the cracks slowly spread. Those closed wounds ruptured again, and like cracked clay, they fell into the bottomless darkness. He was collapsing. After being defeated by this gentle happiness, the monster had no place to stay. He hid in the darkness with a sorrowful cry, dissipating with the darkness. On the face that was streaked by tears, the cracks spread and turned into dust. "Thank you, Miss YG." Guashuk raised his broken face and sincerely thanked her. Tears flowed down his face as he welcomed the arrival of the end. In the end, a mocking smile suddenly appeared on the decaying face. "But you don't think this is the end, do you?" In that instant, the decay and collapse came to an abrupt end. The withered darkness swept and gushed out, turning into a solemn crown that covered his mottled long hair, reflecting a gloomy light. It swallowed up all the glory. In the pure darkness, the face that had stopped cracking smiled and looked at Huaishi's stunned face. "Do you think I will be defeated by this kind of thing?" Huaishi froze in place. He forgot to breathe. He could only hear the rapid and difficult heartbeat in his chest. His heart was clenched by an invisible hand, struggling in pain. He was swallowed up by a sudden chill. Unbelievable. This old monster actually had no attachment to such happiness. What the hell was he pursuing in life? Was he really still alive? Was he really the human he thought he was? A bad move, a bad move. It's really a pity. Guashuk raised his head and laughed heartily. He raised his hand and happily wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. "Such a happy feeling. I really miss it. What a beautiful killing move, Miss YG. Too beautiful. So beautiful that for a moment I thought I was going to lose. What a pity, ha 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 ha." "Are you sad?" "Miss YG, if I were the kind of person who would yearn for this kind of happiness, the winner would definitely be you, right?" Guashuk grinned mockingly, his sharp teeth protruding from his gums. "It's a pity that I don't even have the slightest bit of care and affection for a disciple who's thrown my face into hell." Guashuk didn't hide his coldness and cruelty at all as he said disdainfully, "I've already abandoned him." Huaishi's face was ashen, and the temperature in his heart gradually dropped. The enemy in front of him was a monster who could abandon happiness at will, who could abandon the most important person's care as if it were a pair of worn-out shoes. At this moment, right in front of Huaishi, Guashuk, who had completely transformed into a monster, raised his hand and stretched it towards Huaishi's face. Between his 5 fingers, a phone appeared, revealing the lock screen. It was a photo. "What's this?" Huaishi's eyes widened. In the photo, there was a young and playful girl about 8 years old with 2 ponytails. She smiled sweetly, riding on her grandfather's neck, and made a V sign towards the camera. "Do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see it?" Guashuk's phone screen almost hit Huaishi's face. On the screen, the old man with the funny knitted hat was laughing happily at Huaishi through the screen. "Don't tell me you think that I'm the kind of old man who has lost his family and is alone." Guashuk asked curiously, "It's already this year. Do you still think that experts are heartless and have no attachments? That they can't even send out a red packet during the festive season? No way, right? No way, right?" Who is this?" Huaishi only felt that his brain was buzzing, and it wasn't enough to process it. "Of course it's my granddaughter. Although she's the daughter of that unfilial disciple, she's completely different from that bastard who only knows how to backstab his master." Guashuk's eyes widened, and he said in a trembling voice, "She's already at the age where she can call me grandpa. She's soft and sticky like a ball made of glutinous rice. So her nickname is Little Glutinous Rice. Do you see it? Do you see it?" He took a deep breath and roared in Huaishi's ear, "This is my treasure. As for that bastard Shojing who forgets his roots and deviates from the orthodoxy, it doesn't matter where he dies. Don't even think about entering my house. It's fine as long as he brings my sweetheart here. Thus, proud, happy, and excited, Gwashuk spread out his hands and proudly declared, I already have a treasure that surpasses that happiness. In the dead silence, Huaishur only felt that his brain had become a mess. Thousands of thoughts ran through his mind, and in the end, it turned into a word. F*CK. Damn it, Gwashuk, you're actually a winner in life. He had calculated everything and thought of all possibilities. Huaishur had made 100,000 plans and prepared for all kinds of changes, but he didn't expect that this bastard Gwashuk's life would be so good. 100,000 lemons were instantly stuffed into Huaishur's heart, and his eyes were wet. Damn it, we're all cooking demons. Why is this old dog so slutty? During the day, he had nothing to do. During the festive season, he went home to throw a tantrum at his disciple, and he also played with his granddaughter. Occasionally, he wanted to beat up the young people, and the Dongxiao family had to pay for it. Huaishur's expression twitched, and he restrained himself with difficulty. He didn't want to kill this old dog with a knife. Aren't you angry? Don't you want to kill me? Gwashuk lay on the table, turned his face, and looked up. He laughed strangely and enjoyed Huaishur's twitching expression. This old man is living a very good life. Below the stage, Hoop had already covered his face. He didn't want to see this old man's cruel scene of him showing off his dog. After finally showing off enough Huaishur, Gwashuk looked at that numb face that had nothing to live for. Finally, he put away his phone in satisfaction and looked up to the sky, laughing loudly. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Young man, you're still too impulsive and don't know how to think. The knife isn't sharp, and the horse is too thin. What do you have a fight with me? When a happy smile gradually disappeared, it finally revealed the dark malevolence of a cooking demon. Beside Gwashuk, the bamboo basket on the fire trembled violently. It could no longer suppress the power that was gathering and transforming within, but the lid of the bamboo basket was firmly suppressed by Gwashuk. He controlled the most critical moment of the fire. It was a sacrifice to the heavens, a sacrifice to the axis of the world. It was a supreme sacrifice that only a few gods could enjoy. This was the final prison. Beneath Gwashuk's shattered body, in the endless darkness, a solemn aura rose. It was as if it wanted to awaken the gods that had once died. It prayed for all things to bear witness to this noble sacrifice. But when he looked at the old figure that was gradually immersed in the darkness, Huaishur was so puzzled. With such a status, such a family, and such skills. Gwashuk, your life is so beautiful. Why do you have to rack your brains to beg for the rancher's favor? Why bow down to something that could destroy the entire world? He couldn't help but ask, is the power of a cooking demon that important to you, rancher? Surrounded by endless disasters, Gwashuk turned his head. He didn't understand what he was thinking. He asked in puzzlement, that kind of thing is the greatest negation of a cooking demon, right? Huaishur froze in place. It was hard to understand why the culinary demon, who had fallen from grace due to the nature of humans and had stepped onto the path of disaster with the endless desire for good food, would actually refer to the rancher as that kind of thing in disdain. He also couldn't understand why the rancher, who saw all things as food, would deny the value of a cooking demon's existence. Miss Huaishur, I'm afraid you've misunderstood something. Gwashuk laughed mockingly. Do you actually think that a cooking demon would believe in a rancher from the bottom of his heart? Other than idiots who don't even know what they're doing, would there be anyone who would revere that kind of thing? The rancher's throne was not an existence that cooking demons worshipped. On the contrary, as long as that kind of thing existed, it was a humiliation that all cooking demons had to endure and bear. That's right. Miss Huaishur, you don't understand. You haven't comprehended it yet. Just like how I used to be, I never understood the obsession that my teacher couldn't give up until he died and passed on to me. It wasn't until he truly became the cooking demon and truly had the qualifications to accept the trial to reach the peak of cooking demons that he realized how laughable his previous thoughts were. How naive. This was a scar that could never be forgotten and could never be ignored. He had once yearned for the true essence, and in order to pursue the pinnacle, he didn't hesitate to set foot on the paradise. What kind of cruel scene he saw! That was the hell that all cooking demons were enraged and afraid of. There is no need to elaborate on the difficult experiences and countless setbacks and tests along the way. When he reached the end of the journey and saw the rancher for the first time, he understood everything. That was indeed a god that had descended into hell, a genuine ruler, an out-and-out symbol of a god. This grace was to shepherd all things, and this majesty was to reap all things. What he represented was the truth of the end of the world and all things becoming one. Never satiated, eternally devouring, eternal greed and thirst. If it wasn't just that, how good would it be if that supreme divinity could be transferred a little by the will of a human? Wouldn't it be wonderful? It was just a small, unexpected difference, but it made a decisive difference. It made all cooking demons unable to revere this great god. What arose spontaneously was an irreconcilable hatred. He had always only thought about eating. As long as he ate, he would feel full. As long as he ate, it was enough. Other than that, no matter how exquisite and wonderful the delicacies were, they were no different from dirt to him. Everything that cooking demons did, in his eyes, had no value at all. They pursued the pinnacle of their lives, sacrificed all their pursuits, and paid all the results. In his eyes, it was simply meaningless. It was too humiliating. This humiliation was too great, and every cooking demon who knew all of this couldn't bear it. In his eyes, there was no difference between humans, whether black or white, good or evil. In his mouth, there was no difference between food, whether it was delicacies or dung. Gods were equal, whether it was enemies or subordinates. He had equal love and recognition, and they all had the same appetite and greed. Such an equal God and world was simply disgusting. Chapter 695. No matter which cooking demon they were, they couldn't bear such humiliation. Since the day someone fell into hell and became a culinary demon, everyone who came here had challenged the rancher with no chance of winning. They put everything on the line and gave everything they had. They offered the greatest work of their lives in front of him. They wanted to let this cruel god experience the existence of delicacies. They wanted him to experience the essence of eating and pursue the existence of delicacies. With this evil human nature, he challenged the fallen god to a duel. They wanted to completely destroy this hypocritical holiness. Then, they would suffer a tragic defeat. There was no exception. However, this desire for victory and persistence in the path of culinary demons still caused countless people to step onto this path of despair. Even if the culinary demon competition was set up, the organizing committee was set up, and new blood was constantly cultivated, constantly accumulating, and constantly trying to climb to that peak to challenge the cruelest enemy in the world. As long as the rancher's holy crown existed, this humiliation could not be washed away. As long as the culinary demons existed, this challenge would not end. Miss YG, such an enemy, such despair. One day, you will be able to experience it. Please continue to grow and move forward. He was full of hope. After pausing for a moment, he revealed a sinister smile. If I don't defeat him here, at that moment, the solemn and sacred sacrifice began. The final sacrifice was brought to the table. The sacrifice and sacrifice, which had been at the peak of all the recipes in Eastern Xia for thousands of years, was placed in front of Huai Shi. There was no bright golden light, nor was there a brilliant flame. However, when it was placed in front of Huai Shi, he suddenly had the illusion that the world was revolving around this authority. The stars revolved around this place, and the axis of heaven and earth was right in front of him. That was a boundary that even young Arbiter Ming could not cross, unless one day he could become a master of celestial genealogy. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to touch this sacrifice. Just by looking at it, he felt as if he was about to be swallowed up by the endless flames. He could see himself being burned to ashes. This was not a domain that he could touch. When Guashuk finally used his full strength, a towering mountain rose into the air, allowing Huai Shi who was at the foot of the mountain, to recognize the gap between them. This old fellow, from the beginning to the end, was just playing around. I admit defeat. That was what he wanted to say. However, when he opened his mouth and made a sound, what came out of his mouth had already become an unbelievably joyous voice. Ashy, 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 ashy. I'm eating. Huaisha froze on the spot in disbelief, but Paper Suko revealed a happy and charming smile. She slipped past Huaisha's control, raised her hand, and reached for the bull's head. Wait a minute. Why is my substitute so fond of courting death? Even if it had given birth to divinity, it was still too smart. In the blink of an eye, Huaisha had found the only answer. Tangi, you schemed against me. When Huaisha really put his hand on the bull's horn, he felt as if he had grasped the core of the world, and his soul was about to be flung out of his body. He was so scared that he wanted to change his pants. He couldn't care less about hiding anymore and roared in the Book of Destiny. What are you doing? Sponsor partnerships. A cartoon version of Little Crow jumped out from the bottom of the page, and a bubble appeared above its head, telling him in an extremely cartoonish manner, how can a person live without sponsor partnerships? But you can't do all sponsor partnerships. Huaisha was so scared that his face turned green. Other people sponsor partnerships to make a living, but you sponsor partnerships to seek death. It's fine, I won't be the one dying anyway. Little Crow skipped to the next page, and even had time to turn back and throw a coquettish glance at Huaisha. Don't be afraid, it will hurt at first, but it will be much more comfortable later. F***. It's fine if you want to toy with an innocent young man like me, but you want to do something dirty. Huaisha trembled with anger, and his hands and feet were cold on such a hot day. Tears flowed down his face uncontrollably. How can you be satisfied with a tool like me? Hell is empty, and Tangi is in the human world. It was a pity that there was no time for him to go through the process. The piece of beef dipped in thick sauce and spices had already been placed in Huaisha's mouth. It melted in his mouth, and it was indescribably fragrant. Chewing seemed to bring about supreme enjoyment. But before he could experience this wonderful feeling, Huaisha exploded. In a literal sense, it was an explosion of spirit and soul. There was an explosion, not a radiation, but a contraction. The entire world seemed to collapse at this moment. Inwardly, everything rushed toward Huaisha, rushing into his soul. Heaven and earth contracted in an instant, and the mountains and rivers became flat. The lakes and seas dried up, the sun and the moon dimmed, and everything died out. Everything was cruelly and violently stuffed into Huaisha's soul. Together with him, they crumpled into a ball, turning into an extremely tiny dot. Time, the world, space, death, consciousness, life, and even everything not worth mentioning turned into nothingness. He seemed to have everything, but was abandoned by all of it in an instant. Amidst the endless expansion and contraction, he turned into an indescribable chaos. There was a moment when he remained clear-headed, and when he looked blankly at the world of nothingness, he saw a mighty torrent sprouting from hell. It moved upwards, absorbing the endless death, giving birth to the essence of life and miracles, turning into all things in this world. After it was retracted, it extended towards the future. The long river connected everything together, the past, present, and future. Above the endless dark hell, he sat on a small boat called the Present Realm, following the torrent, sailing toward the unknown future. The lights of this world were as bright as ever. It was as if a god had descended. No, it should be said that a god had descended here. As long as one had eyes, they could determine this sacredness. When Huaisha Suko stretched out her hand to the caged bull in front of her, the noble spirit that shone instantly illuminated everyone's eyes. The blurry light wheel that was originally hanging behind her shook with a bang, bursting out with a high-pitched sound as if the world was operating. The color of bronze emerged from it, followed by complicated patterns. When the disguise called human was removed, the noble divinity that flowed out from the pillar of the spirit and marrow of the world axis was revealed. That was the incarnation of a god. No one knew what method was used or what price was paid, But this ray of bright light was undoubtedly the remnant light of the old days that had crossed a long time and fallen to the present. At this moment, Huayzisuko had become an existence that was not inferior to Liz Hetmock in the American lineage, and even surpassed her. Otherwise, it would be impossible to complete such a perfect divine bestowal. It awakened the once sleeping miracle and once again turned into a perfect prototype. This body was already the reflection of a god on the ground. In this way, in front of Guashuk, she began to eat happily and elegantly. It tastes good. In the faint glow, the blurry face raised, glanced at Guashuk, and praised, "You are considerate." Guashuk did not speak. He just stared blankly at the cold and solemn halo, ignoring the stinging pain in his eyes from the majesty of the god. There was no longer the tyranny and terror of the past. From the memories of his ancestors and the inheritance of his bloodline, at this moment, he no longer had any arrogance and disrespect. There was no time to be shocked and questioned, nor did he have the leisure to be suspicious and frightened. Just like his ancestors, he didn't say anything. He just bowed his head respectfully and accepted this supreme praise. The sacrificial ceremony continued, because the god descended to enjoy this long-awaited delicacy. In the substitute named Huayzisuko, the huge divinity enjoyed the worship in front of it and grew rapidly. In just a few minutes, it crossed the long years of brewing. With this seed as the foundation, the projection of the towering tree evolved. The foundation was laid. Divinity operated. In the rotation of authority and divine grace, the god, who had fallen into silence a long time ago, heard the call from the future. Separated by a long history, two small notes resonated, evolving into a resonance and symphony that crossed time. It made the silent will stretch out a thin line toward the distant future and descend into the body of Huayzisuko. It was just as Tangi expected. The will of the god operated on the surface of the abyss constructed by the void of the soul. She opened her empty eyes. Then, she saw the figure that had been waiting here for a long time. Even though it had become completely different, there was still a familiar aura, which made the indifferent and dull consciousness glow with a hint of surprise. "You are," she was answered with a bright and beautiful smile. "Long time no see, Shiha. How are you?" Just like that, Tangi stepped forward, opened her arms, and gently hugged her former companion. She closed her eyes, feeling the long-lost warmth, and whispered, "I miss you very much." This concern from human nature was so sincere and warm that it shook Shiha's consciousness, causing her eyes to gradually soften. But soon, her beautiful face froze in place. Only her brows slowly furrowed. When she lowered her head, she saw the crimson crystal that had sunk into her abdomen. The solemn miracle called the God's Wedge had penetrated her body. In an instant, the divinity that had descended was destroyed. Tangi raised her head, looked at her dull face, and asked softly, "Also, you didn't think that I would pretend that nothing had happened, did you?" Just like that, she calmly pulled out the God's Wedge and waved goodbye. "Sister, goodbye." This was the late revenge after thousands of years. In the next moment, the incarnation of the god, named Shiha, completely collapsed, turned into endless streams of light, and poured into the container called the God's Wedge. A small portion of the light descended and merged into Huaishur's projection, establishing the essence of Huaishur Suzi. At this moment, in the mortal world, in hell, whether it was the tomorrow's news, the looming hall, or even the Eastern Summer genealogy, all records regarding Huaichi Suzi were rapidly disappearing. Pen, paper, hard disk, brain, and even memories, all records became blurry and distant under the judgment of divine will. There were no details at all. All that was left was an empty silhouette and a name called Huaichi Suzi. The entire Ingzhou changed silently. Most people did not even notice it, except for a few people who reacted at this moment. However, the speed of the divine will was so fast and decisive that it did not leave any trace. All that was left was a meaningless piece of information. A certain miracle was activated for a moment. Just like that, 3 years in advance, after saving a lot of effort and materials. The fake miracle called white paper planeseed was completed at this moment. While everyone was in a trance and daze for a short, while a crisp applause rang out. Huai Chi Su Zi smiled and thanked the sacrifice in front of her. Thank you for your hospitality. She finished eating. Was she distracted? She seemed to have overlooked something, but she could not remember. It should be just a detail, right? Maybe? With such a subtle confusion, all the audience could not help but cheer for the heroic counterattack in front of them. Only Guo Shuk's expression was still stiff in place, maintaining a bowed posture. After confirming that the divine will that descended here had quietly left, cold sweat finally seeped out from his forehead drop by drop and fell on the table. It accumulated into a pool of water in a sorry state. His legs were trembling. How could he, like his ancestors, personally offer his sacrifice to a noble god? Had he really presided over a perfect prison in his lifetime? Such unrealistic panic and such strong emotions filled his heart, and he almost couldn't help but cry again. Compared to this, the so-called victory or defeat was not worth mentioning at all. In particular, the vague signs and hints that had appeared in the records of his ancestors had made him vaguely draw a circle in his heart that even he himself could not believe. No matter what, this was a surprise that even the mysterious bird could not predict the true content of. Even though there was no one to speak of and share it with, at this moment, Guo Shuk was already satisfied to the extent that he had no desires. All he thought about was bathing and changing clothes, devoutly fasting, and this generous gift of gratitude to the mandate of heaven. When Huaishur opened his eyes again, this was the only scene he saw. What was going on? What the hell was this? What should he do? What exactly happened? Countless question marks rose in his mind, but all he saw was a bare plate and a bull's skull that looked like it was carved out of white jade. He actually really finished eating? Yes, that's right. Miss Huai Chi Su, you have achieved a miracle and completed the ceremony of the prison. Guo Shuk said calmly. According to the agreement, I lost. That's not right, is it? Huaishur made a sound and interrupted him. You shouldn't say that. Guo Shuk was stunned. The person who lost should not be you, Guo Shuk. Even though he was incomparably eager for victory, Huaishur still could not ignore this point. I cheated. You should be clear about this. The result is the result. The process is not important. Only the right process will bring the right result. In his weakness, Huaishur raised his eyes and looked at him. The victory I want should not be like this. It should be something pure. If it was his true level, he would have fallen in the second round, not to mention challenging the final prison. When Guo Shuk used all his strength, the gap between the two sides became a chasm that made people despair. Without Tongyi's help, he would not even be able to see Guo Shuk's full strength. Even though he was still very unwilling and still wanted to punch this damn old man in the face, Huaishur had to thank him for his constant guidance and generous teaching. Just like how he wanted to rely on his fist to defeat Elder Luo once, he wanted to defeat Guo Shuk very much. He wanted to win fair and square. I lost. Huaishur sighed and admitted in frustration. But what was incredible was that after admitting this result, his mood became cheerful. Even if this old bastard wanted to talk bad, he did not care. At most, he would put a sack on him in the middle of the night and beat him up. He could not win in cooking, but he could win in fighting. This old man will not be modest, Miss Huai Chi Su. If you don't want an easy victory, you will only be regarded as an idiot. Don't tell me you're counting on me to decline repeatedly? Without showing any mercy, Guo Shuk put on a mocking smile. It's not easy to survive until now with your subpar cooking skills. How about this old man give you a consolation prize later? An autograph? Take the defeated by Guo Shuk sign. If you meet similar people in the future, you can form a group to keep each other warm. It was strange that there were people in the world who did not want a victory that was delivered to their doorstep. They were simply too stupid. Guo Shuk enjoyed the joy of a winner with a clear conscience. There was no hesitation or uneasiness at all. There was no sign of shaking hands and sympathizing with each other as other people expected. Huaishur rolled his eyes and did not bother to pay attention to him. He had no energy left to be angry. He did not know what that black-hearted woman, Tangi, did with his body. He was almost completely drained. Now he did not even have the strength to stand up. However, when Guashuk finished his sarcastic remarks and turned to leave, Huaisha could not help but call out to him. "Wait a minute." He looked at the old man, who turned around and asked curiously, "What's the final result?" Guashuk raised his eyebrows. "Result? You've lost. Is there any other result? You don't need to repeat this." Huaisha felt that his eyes were about to roll to the sky. "I'm only referring to, what's the result of you going to see the rancher and pursuing the pinnacle of cooking?" It was the result that Guashuk had downplayed and glossed over. What was it? He was curious from the bottom of his heart and wanted to know. Ha ha, that's where the problem lies. Guashuk sighed and shrugged. It was unknown whether he was helpless or at a loss. The subtle smile on his face was elusive. "To be honest, I'm not too sure whether there was any result in the end. However, after exhausting all my skills, the rancher finally admitted one thing. The food I made was a little unpalatable." In the days, Huaisha's expression became extraordinarily wonderful. Ha ha ha! Guashuk recalled the proudest moment of his life. He looked up to the sky and laughed proudly. "I think I probably won." This was the final result of the trial of the Imperial Chef's demon. The winner, Guashuk. Chapter 696. Wow, this old guy is so ugly. In the midst of the noise, Yuan Zhao looked at the headline of tomorrow's news on his phone. The photo of the champion of the Imperial Cooking Magic Audition. The old man, with a strange grin, was casually gesturing a V to the camera. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before, but it didn't matter. Although he didn't know how he won against Miss Huaiji, he must have used some despicable means. Thinking that Miss Huaiji was weak, helpless, and pitiful crying right now, Yuan Zhao's heart was burning with anxiety. He couldn't wait to immediately seek justice for her. However, the situation didn't allow it. Yuan Zhao looked up to the sky and sighed. He casually kicked away a guy who was trying to quietly touch his trouser pocket. He drew a precise parabola and stuffed it into the open trash can. When he looked around, he was suspicious from the bottom of his heart. Was this really Yingzhou? It was different from the clean scene that ordinary people imagined. The streets were in a mess. No one cleaned them at all. The streets were full of illegal vendors and flowing sewage. The walls were full of messy graffiti. In the distance, he could vaguely hear a few dirty children being chased by angry adults. While running, they hurriedly turned around and pointed their middle fingers, shouting F at K and other unbearable swear words. Osaka, Busaki District. This was one of the largest mixed-race gathering places in the entire Yingzhou, second only to the inner circle of Danbua in the capital in Yashizaka. It was a lawless area where smuggling, forbidden drugs, and various forces intersected. "Big Sister Yi, how long do we have to wait?" He was full of sadness and helplessly sighed. He didn't know what this woman was doing. Chewing bubblegum and carrying a skateboard in her hand, Yi Shuiyu wore a ridiculously wide t-shirt and wide-neck pants. She also wore a tattered baseball cap. At first glance, she seemed to be a rebellious girl who jumped out of nowhere. She didn't have a majesty and imposing manner of the number one person in the new generation of Dongxia. But the dull pain in the back of Yuan Zhao's head always reminded him of the consequences of daring to offend and sneak away. A week ago, he had just arrived in Yingzhou. He was sitting in the car, eating hot pot and singing. Before he had time to meet the girls, he was in trouble in front of Zhaowei Street. He was caught red-handed by this woman, who seemed to be waiting for a rabbit under the tree stump. "Since you're already here, why don't you come with me? I just happen to need someone to help me." As he said this, he directly grabbed Yuan Zhao by the back of his collar and dragged him to run around Yingzhou. He wandered around aimlessly and then constantly threw all kinds of whimsical ideas and outrageous requests, completely treating Yuan Zhao as a coolie. As a result, he wasn't able to go to Nara immediately. By the time Hiruzen realized what had happened, he had already missed his dream reunion with Kaori Himiki. Just thinking about this made him want to cry. Why is the path of true love so bumpy? In all honesty, he originally wanted to run away. But as soon as he was 200 meters away from this bad woman, he would run into crazy bad luck. Ever since he was hit by a truck 8 times within 3 steps, the pitiful Yuan Zhao could only give up on running away and was toyed with by Yi Shuiya. Damn it! Why is this damn old man so annoying? He angrily looked at the briefing in the news, gritted his teeth, and wanted to bite his handkerchief. I also want to eat Kaori Himiki's food. Beside him, Yi Shuiya glanced at this guy who didn't have any sense at all and rolled her eyes almost to the sky. Little Yuan, although it's a pity, I have to remind you, that damn old man can hang you up and beat you 800 times with one finger. She rubbed her swollen eyebrows and reminded him helplessly. Also, the things that woman makes, as long as you eat one bite, the whole village's GDP will increase. Last but not least, the most important thing is that there is no red string in your life. You two are completely insulated. Do you understand? Nonsense. Yuan Zhao opened his eyes wide and his blood boiled. True love can break through everything. Enough of this bootlicker. Yi Shuiya's eyes almost rolled to the sky. She spat out the bubble gum, casually rolled it into a ball, and threw it to a distant pile of trash. Yuan Zhao, unrequited love won't change the ending. Bootlicker will only make people hate you. You're so young, yet you don't learn good things. It seems like your cousin really doesn't beat you enough. These 2 days, she was not annoyed by Yuan Zhao. He treated her like a street diviner, making her push the fate chart for him and the cute Kaori Himiki. Unfortunately, no matter how she pushed, there was no good result. Even without pushing, Yi Shuiya could see that there was something wrong with that guy's Kaori Himiki. Fate was extremely strange. It was as if it had suddenly jumped out of a rock without any foundation. However, the origins and hidden connections behind it were extremely complicated. There were at least 16 completely different results of the divination, and they were constantly changing and combining. A typical fate lock. Some people didn't want Kaori Himiki to be taken by others, so according to her fate, they set up tens of layers of extremely complicated and dangerous fog and curses. Even so, it couldn't completely hide from Yi Shuiya. Yi Shuiya's style was the same as his. He never relied too much on details, but was good at overlooking the big picture. If it was only a problem of compatibility, there was no need to solve it. Just by looking at the position and direction of the pillars, she knew that it was impossible for Yuan Zhao to be with them. No, it should be heaven's nemesis. If this natal chart was a man, it would be fine. At most, he would be the younger brother of the younger brother for the rest of his life. It didn't matter if he was a little unlucky. However, after extreme misfortune, he would be able to benefit from the misfortune and become a late bloomer. When the time came, it wouldn't be a problem for him to become one of the mainstays of the Eastern Summer family tree. If this natal chart was a woman, then Yuan Zhao would be in trouble. Once they got involved, they would definitely die without a burial ground. Of course, this kind of thing was not absolute. Perhaps it was like what he said, true love could break through everything. But no matter how he looked at this little brother, he didn't seem like someone who was worthy of that kind of key. One had to have some self-awareness. Forget about this kind of idiot who would act rashly on a whim. Don't listen when you talk. Don't understand when you talk. Don't do when you understand. Since ancient times, the men of the Yuan family had always been brainless and one-track minded. It was fine if they were older and more mature. At least they had the responsibility of the family and wouldn't act recklessly. But if they were younger, forget it. It was useless even if they used their brains. They could only rely on their iron fists. In any case, Yi Shuiya had already made up her mind to absolutely not let Yuan Zhao have any relationship with that woman. She stretched out her hand and spread her index and middle fingers. Like a pair of scissors, she directly cut off Yuan Zhao's cell phone signal and confiscated it. All right, stop slacking. We've been dawdling inside for so long. It's about time for someone to come. Just as Yi Shuiya's voice fell, heavy footsteps sounded from behind the door. Finally, they came back. A peephole was opened on the thick and heavy door, revealing a face with faint scales. The beastly vertical pupils coldly swept over them. The great elder is currently resting. He won't see any guests today. The person coldly said, "You should leave. This place does not welcome you." After waiting in this broken place for half an hour, they didn't even enter the door. Not even a cup of tea was enough, but they actually still had this kind of attitude. Yuan Zhao glared and prepared to get angry, but Yi Shuiya raised her hand and patted the back of his head, interrupting his movements. "Let's go, Yuan Zhao," she indifferently said. "They won't see any guests. Don't tell me you're going to rush in and beat them up. We're leaving just like that?" Yuan Zhao asked puzzledly. "Otherwise," Yi Shuiya glanced at the closed door behind her and lightly snorted. "Moreover, didn't we already receive a reply? They're wholeheartedly thinking of jumping into the pit. It's useless even if you kowtow outside. And what's next? Is the matter in Osaka finished?" Yuan Zhao's eyes lit up, and he instantly became excited. "Where are we going?" "The capital." Yi Shuiya ruthlessly extinguished the thoughts in his heart. "We're going to the capital. The game time is over. Yuan Zhao, you should go greet the masters of this place." Casually grabbing the junior high's collar, Yi Shuiya turned around and left. After a long time, behind the closed door, there was a sigh of relief. Nara, in a quiet room, Hoopa carefully looked at the young girl kneeling in front of him. In silence, his hand twirled the fan that represented elegance and dignity as he pondered. After a long time, he opened his mouth and asked, "Have you already thought it through?" Zhun, she nodded and bowed in thanks. "I've already received too much care from everyone. It's not good to stay and add too much trouble. I think I should say goodbye." Hooper raised his fan and knocked it against his head in a troubled manner. He intentionally or unintentionally glared at a certain man who was drinking tea in the corner of the quiet room before asking, "Is it because that fellow Huai Ji left without saying goodbye?" Zhun, she smiled and shook her head. "It has nothing to do with Miss Huai Ji. This is my own decision. I've already made my decision before. I think that even if Miss Huai Ji knew, she would definitely support me. Whether she supports you or not is not certain. But since it's your decision, I won't stop you." Hoopa sighed and put down his pretentious fan. "Not as the master, but as a family member. Have you thought about where you'll be going next?" "I haven't thought about it yet, but I'll go back and tell my mother that I'm safe. If I have the chance, I'll study hard and enter school. If I can get into Miss Huaiji's alma mater, if my results are good, I'll leave the matter of the recommendation letter to you." She bowed and begged sincerely. "The ivory tower, for someone like you. Even if you don't have a recommendation letter, you should have a 90% chance of getting in," Hoopa said. "If you don't mind getting involved with the Rakimi clan, I have no problem with that." "Thank you so much." Zhun raised her head happily, beaming with joy. On the girl's forehead, a small, smooth horn vaguely protruded from her hair. In the middle of the horn, there was a faint silver metallic glow, like a small ring. This was the after effect of the mixed blood after the puberty period. Once the soul was sublimated, the physical body would also transforming into a complete and perfect state. During the short puberty period, a large amount of energy would be expended to support this transformation, which was akin to rebirth. The original illness would be corrected, and the hidden dangers of the mixed blood would be eliminated. The weak resistance to the infernal realm would also have a chance to be corrected. Although it would be slightly inferior to a normal person's, it wouldn't be too far off. More importantly, the disaster fragments hidden in the mutated blood would also mature and merge with the body. After the puberty, the body would become similar to a large group in the abyss. In addition, the body's innate talents and abilities would be strengthened by that large group. In other words, it's a demon. Hoopa glanced at the horn on She's forehead and nodded. "How do I put it? Although it doesn't feel like you at all, it's surprisingly compatible." After the puberty period, what She obtained was naturally one of the most famous abilities of a demon, monstrous strength. She looked small and thin, but her physical strength had reached an unimaginable level. If she used origin substance to activate it, she would be no different from a human-shaped chariot. The shortcoming was that her blood production ability couldn't keep up. If she used monstrous strength too much in a short period of time, she would become severely anemic. But this was a problem that only the ancient people would have a headache over. 2 blood bags could solve it. It was a simple and vigorous strength, which was very suitable for a one-track-minded girl like Jinshi. Then, I wish you all the best, Jinshi. After failing to persuade her to stay, Hoopa sincerely wished her well. Thank you for your help. No matter when, the Riken clan will always welcome you back. I will always keep a position in the octagon for you. I should be the one receiving the most care. The girl bowed and picked up the heavy backpack beside her. She stood up with a smile. Then, I'll take my leave. Hoopa stood up and saw her out the door. Before leaving, he couldn't help but ask, Are you sure you don't need me to help you deal with that money? It's only 10 million USD. Compared to the reward that Huaichi got, it's just a drop in the ocean. No need. Jinshi shook her head slightly. She looked at the black card hanging on her backpack with nostalgia. Since I made a choice, I have to bear the consequences. Besides, it's only 10 million USD of bad luck and misfortune. One day, I'll work hard to pay it back. When that time comes, I'll definitely have the qualifications to face this brand new life, right? Both of you are so stubborn. Hoopa sighed. He lowered his head and lit the pipe at the corner of his mouth. Finally, he asked, Then, have you thought about what you want to do with your brand new life, Jinshi? About that, I haven't thought about it yet. Jinshi turned her head and showed a bright smile. But I want to be like Miss Huaichi. That's right, like her. Handsome, elegant, and shining in the dark, illuminating those confused eyes. To become the son of the helpless. As long as she worked hard, one day, she would be able to catch up to that distant figure, right? Just like that, with hope in her heart, the girl stepped on her own journey. In silence, Hoopa stared at the girl's back as she gradually disappeared into the distance. After a long, long time, he sighed and glanced behind him. A certain person is really sinful. Huaishir shrugged. I have to say, I didn't do anything. Isn't it because you didn't do anything that you're sinful? You didn't take the initiative, didn't refuse, and didn't take responsibility. I've had enough of the nature of scumbag. Hoopa frowned unhappily. I was hoping that you could help me stop her, but in the end, you just threw a goodbye letter and changed your avatar. You even slacked off the whole time. Aren't you worried at all? I can't take care of her for the rest of her life, right? Huaishir spread his hands. She's already grown up. She made her own choice. What can I do? Wear Huaichi's avatar for the rest of my life. Or tie her up with a chain. That's why a scumbag will always be a scumbag. Even when you're tired of playing with her, you still make it sound so dignified. Huaishir was so angry that he wanted to roll his eyes. That's enough. Even if I'm a scumbag, I'm not a scumbag to you. Why are you so indignant? Probably because you don't like the look of it. Can you please change it to a big sister? Hoopa looked at his real appearance, which he hadn't seen in a long time, and raised his eyebrows. Or are you saying that you finally experienced shame and stopped being obsessed with women's clothing? Would anyone like this kind of thing? Hoopa snorted, Of course. I saw a certain someone wearing it very energetically. It was so bold and unrestrained. How should I put it? At best, it's just an escape from reality, right? Huaishir leaned against the pillar under the eaves and looked at the fish pond in the courtyard, sighing softly. Occasionally, I just want to live a relaxed life. I'll take a leave and go to a place I've never been before, change my appearance, and no one will know who I am. I can also live a less tiring life. But no matter how far I go, I have to return to my original life. Hoopa, rest time is over. What about the identity problem? Do you need help? I was counting on you, but a certain old bastard who's had enough of the show is finally willing to work. My arrest warrant in Yingzhou has been canceled. Congratulations, congratulations. Huaishir raised his hand and showed the notification on his phone. Then, I was stuffed with a bunch of troublesome work again. There's a problem with the academic exchange team, so I'm afraid I have to hurry to the capital. Where are you leaving? Today. I just booked a train to the capital in an hour. If I'm fast, I can even buy a very famous lunchbox from Yingzhou's train station. So hard, Hoopa said. Who isn't? Good luck, Your Excellency. Huaishir hung up his saddlebag and patted her shoulder. Don't forget the reward you promised me. Let's meet again in the capital. He turned his head one last time and glanced at Hoopa, who was now completely different from before. Huaishir waved his hand and said goodbye. The blazing sun outside the eaves spilled down. Under Huaishir's feet, The gradually elongated shadow raised its head, as if smiling, and looked into the distance. A new journey had begun. On the title page of the Book of Destiny, the words silently changed and brand new ink appeared. Divine Miracle Imprint. Pocket paper plane. Burn yourself to achieve a miracle that can only be done once. Hope will come, just like how suffering will eventually come to an end. The hero who opens up the path ahead will become the beacon of the successor, guiding the lost on the road of destiny. As long as the sun rises again, there is no need to be lost in the long night. Chapter 697. Name: Kyoto, Damwa District. On the bleak custom street during the day, the signboard of Fujimoto Corporation was pasted on the second-floor window facing the street. But anyone with a little common sense would know that this place would not be a regular company. Just by looking at the strange logo next to the signboard, the nature of this company was already clear. Yakuza. It didn't matter whether it was called Yakuza or Extreme Way. As a deep-rooted and vibrant civil organization in Ingzhou, it would definitely not end well to be associated with them. Now, just behind the table, the fat middle-aged man who was smoking grinned, revealing a mouthful of big yellow teeth. He looked at the person sitting opposite him and repeated again. Name: Why? Why paper in why paper? A very rare surname. What's your name? Sue. Purin. The fidgeting young man lowered his head and stuttered his name. Several men in suits, smoking on the sofa next to him, looked at his quail-like appearance and laughed mockingly. A man wearing glasses like a cashier suddenly changed his expression, slammed the table, and roared. Big brother asked her name. Don't you know to say it all at once? Bastard. Should I let you understand the consequences of being uneducated? Visible to the naked eye, the young man sitting on the chair couldn't help but tremble, his face pale. He looked like a dispirited young man everywhere in Kyoto. He had no career, no job, and no education. He relied on temporary jobs, stealing, and kidnapping to maintain his life. His clothes were wrinkled, and what was more eye-catching was his face that had been malnourished for a long time or hadn't been exposed to the sun, and his long bangs made people feel gloomy. It was simply the best portrayal of the Cocoon Dweller clan, the classic incarnation of the defeated generation. Even the underworld looked down on such social scum. This kind of useless waste that could only be used to sell organs. Even loan sharks wouldn't let them out. Of course, if the family was very rich, they could squeeze a lot of money out of them. Okay, Yamashita, don't get angry. The smoking big brother waved his hand indifferently. Isn't Tanaka your sworn brother in prison? He introduced you here, give him face. Yamashita coldly glanced at Hawaii paper. He didn't know if it was because this waste ruined the prestige of his sworn brother, or because he lost face, but he snorted coldly. What about age? Fujimoto Corporation, who was also the big brother of the Fujimoto Group, continued to ask. 18. The paper effigy in his arms answered while trembling. You're really young. 18 years old. You still have a lot of potential. Don't be afraid, Mr. Huai Jijun. Fujimoto snuffed out the cigarette and comforted. Times have changed. Now, even Yakuza can't rely on fighting and killing to get by. Killing and arson can't fill our stomachs. People like us who have turned to the film industry are still doing well. I heard that the guys from the Tiger King team have already gone to sell milk tea. How outrageous. You're Tanaka's nephew, so I won't make things difficult for you. But with this thought, the Fujimoto Gumi's life isn't easy either. You have to understand, if you really want a job, you have to sign this. A contract was thrown from the foot of the mountain and landed on the table. The densely packed terms and conditions filled almost every inch of space. It was abnormally complicated, but if one looked carefully, it was nothing more than the words "sell your body." Sign this, and you'll be a member of Fujimoto Gumi Pictures. Don't worry, Mr. Huai Jijun, we won't treat you badly. Fujimoto grinned, revealing a mouth full of big yellow teeth. He smiled. Your appearance is quite good. If you're lucky, you might be able to become famous after dressing up. After he finished speaking, everyone in the room roared with laughter. Just by looking at the messy posters on the wall, one would know what the hell the film they were filming was about. Among them, there were some that had a slightly heavier taste. Even the crows would have an eyesore if they saw it. It really made one sigh about the degeneration of public morals. But what choice did the pitiful, weak, and helpless paper effigy have? He could only sign obediently. He sold his cheap life. Not bad, Mr. Huai Jijun. A man should be decisive. Only by being decisive can you win the future. Fujimoto beamed with joy as he handed over a form. Since you've already joined us, then take a look at the form. Just tick the items that you can accept. Don't mind. This is all for the sake of making money. It's not shameful. The form was densely packed with things that were unsightly and not allowed by the law. It was really not suitable to appear in front of the camera lens. But then, it was their turn to be stunned. Because Mr. Huai Jijun picked up a pen and began to quickly tick off the things on the list. There was no blank line. Hey, Mr. Huai Jijun, don't write nonsense. Yamashita stared with wide eyes and angrily rebuked. Are you serious? Oh, all right. Mr. Huai Jijun summoned his courage, raised his head, and said in a trembling voice, I urgently need money. I can do anything. Please, please. In the silence, the Yakuza in the room looked at each other, revealing a meaningful look. Since that's the case, then I'll have to test it myself. Fujimoto slowly got up, loosened his belt with a smile, and pointed to the door next to him. You go in first and wait for me. I'll be there soon. Pushing open the inner door, he saw a narrow bedroom, with rotten paper all over the floor and a wrinkled and yellowed bed. The smell of body odor, sweat, and a rotten smell wafted over, making him frown. Soon, Fujimoto swaggered in, humming a song, and smiled at Mr. Huai Jijun. Mr. Huai Jijun, don't be nervous. Let's go to bed first. He took the lead, took off his shoes, sat on the bed, and waved at the newcomer enthusiastically. Come on, I'll show you something good. Hesitantly, Huaiji sat down on the bed. Then, she watched as Chun Xiaolian pulled something. Instantly, the entire bed began to descend rapidly. Like an elevator, it descended. After passing through a considerable distance, it entered a spacious basement that resembled a dojo. It was covered with tatami mats. There were also several burly men sweating in the equipment area next to it. When they saw Fujimoto and the others come down, they greeted them enthusiastically. Without exception, these people had some strange characteristics on their bodies. Some were scales, some were hair. Where is this place? Mr. Huai Jijun asked uneasily. For the time being, this place can be considered as one of our warehouses. However, it has been a long time since we dealt with illicit drugs. So, we might as well change it and turn it into a gym. Fujimoto walked in front and said, Since you were introduced by that Tanaka fellow from his hometown, you should be reliable. I won't hide it from you. After all, this is just a gym. However, Mr. Huai Jijun, there are some things that cannot be joked about. In his hand, Mr. Huai Jijun held the form that Mr. Huai Jijun had just filled out and waved it. Forget about the sections on debt collection, loan lending, and illegal work. Even the sections on personnel assignment and taking the blame were all marked in red. Even the meaningless sections on smuggling, illicit drugs, murder, and extortion were marked with ticks. He had made up his mind to join the underworld and would not turn back on this path. I say, Mr. Huai Jijun, we will occasionally do some intermediary work for the people from our hometown. Although they're all shady positions, they can at least earn a living. These days, it is not easy for mixed-race people to live a good life. If anyone needs help, we will help them. Back then, I did the same. But no matter what, isn't this too much? Fujimoto took off his wig, revealing a bald head with 3 strange sharp horns. He sternly admonished, You are only 18 years old. You are not at the end of your rope yet. Why do you have to be so radical? Huai Jijun trembled with excitement, then shouted loudly, I joined Green Sun from the bottom of my heart. For a moment, the room was silent. In the silence, everyone looked at each other. Then, they looked at Huai Jijun with cold and uneasy eyes. Fujimoto's face gradually darkened. Mr. Huai Jijun, There are some things that cannot be said carelessly. It was Uncle Tanaka who told me, this is the fastest way to make money. I came here because I made up my mind. YG Jun's eyes widened. He forgot to be afraid and shouted out the words in his stomach. I beg you, Mr. Fujimoto. I am willing to do anything. This is my life's request. Please. Fujimoto did not speak. He waved his hand to signal him to shut up. A few people immediately came over and watched him. Then, Fujimoto turned around, took out his phone, and walked to a corner. After the call connected, he began to scold Tanaka on the other end. Tanaka's voice could be vaguely heard on the phone. There's nothing we can do about that kid. Yes, both of his parents have terminal symptoms. They're half dead. I'm just showing him the right path. Besides, who doesn't know that the hybrids are in cahoots with Green Sun? All of us Yakuza hybrids are in cahoots with Green Sun. Fujimoto was still scolding. After he finished scolding and finally vented his anger, he turned back to look at the nervous Huai Jijun and scratched his bald head angrily. Hey, Huai Jijun, go back. I don't need people like you here. Huai Jijun struggled agitatedly and shouted, even if you don't want me here, I will not leave. I will go to the Tiger King group in the Yamatagumi. Someone will want me. Fujimoto's face became more and more ugly. How could he not know what kind of people his peers were? As a mafia, the Fujimoto Gumi was considered to have changed careers relatively early. Now, they relied on some color videotapes and a bunch of business as tour guides to the custom street to make a good living. As for the Tiger King group, on the surface, they sold milk tea, but in fact, they were involved in the business of hiding banned drugs and milk tea raw materials. As for the Yamatagumi, they were simply organ traders. They really had no humanity at all. If he let this little mixed race go to that kind of place, even if he could still survive, he would die without a complete corpse in a short time. Are you serious? Fujimoto's face was ashen as he asked coldly. I'm serious. Very good. At least now you are a little more manly. Huai Jijun. Fujimoto took 2 deep puffs of a cigarette, then raised his foot, stepped on the cigarette butt, and spat out the smoke disdainfully. If you come to the Fujimoto Gumi to introduce a job, I can introduce you to a salary that is enough to make a living. You see, isn't it every man's dream to be an actor? There are so few handsome men in the industry, you can do it. But Green Sun's job is different. He said coldly, Huai Jijun, if you want to join us, please go through me. Chapter 698. With that, Fujimoto took off his suit jacket and hooked his finger at Huai Shiki. If you want to be a Green Sun, you must at least be able to fight, right? Do you see that? The one who gives orders and the weakest here. If you can't even win against me, then don't dream of becoming a Green Sunday. If you sign my contract, I will send you to the assembly line of the Black Factory. Unless you earn me 10 million Ingzhou dollars, I won't let you go even if you vomit blood. This was a lie. Not only was he one of the best fighters here, but he had already made up his mind to break his legs in the cruelest way to extinguish his unrealistic thoughts. At most, he would raise a waist for 3 or 4 days. The social welfare of Ingzhou was still good. He could earn it back with his household registration certificate and driver's license. Being a Yakuza was not a charity. Every year, there would be this kind of brainless guy who wanted to join. His wishful thinking was to make a lot of money by killing and arson. In fact, there was no one who could be useful. They were all waste. In the end, they could only harm others and themselves. Come, come. He patted his chest and roared at the hesitant Huai Shiki. Why don't you move? Are you also a waste? Or is your determination so shameful? Huai Shiki. I'm afraid of hurting you. She said timidly, I'm very powerful, really. The sound of laughter sounded around. Fujimoto looked up to the sky and laughed, patting his chest. The smile of the former ghost Fujimoto became more and more mocking. Come, Huai Shiki, come. Let me see how powerful you are. In the silence, the trembling Huai Shiki hesitated for a long time and slowly nodded. Then, she took a step forward. Deep breath. In the mocking eyes of many people around, she slowly bent down, as if she was in a horse stance. She put her hands forward and looked up at Fujimoto in front of her. The eyes under her bangs seemed to be serious. Such a skillful and conspicuous structure made others stunned and incredulous. Sumo? That's right, that was the beginning of sumo. Shiki. He lowered his center of gravity and put his hands forward, ready to wrestle with his opponent at any time. But that posture was only reserved for sumo giants who weighed more than 200 kilograms and had large shoulders and a round waist. Now, that Hanakami, who was as thin as a stick of reed, put it out. It was especially comical. Wow, this is a strong man. Tengbin couldn't help but laugh. Are you trying to fight me? Come on, come on. Be careful, Mr. Fujimoto. The paper figurine in her arms leaned forward and said softly, I've been practicing sumo since I was young. If I accidentally hurt you, I'll feel bad. This was also a lie. This was a posture he had learned from the book 10 Minutes to Teach You Sumo Tricks that he had bought from the bookstore in the subway before he left. After 10 minutes of learning, Huaichi felt that he had completely mastered the sport of sumo. Yep, I'm going to assume this pose, but before I start, he slowly lowered his raised hands. He pressed his hands on his thighs to support his upper body. Then he took a deep breath. It was almost as though he wanted to suck in all the air in the basement into his stomach. His astonishing lung capacity caused Tengbin's face to change. But before he could say anything, he saw Huaichi's body slanting. He slowly raised his left foot, raised it up until it was higher than his head. Then, a hurricane howled. A loud sound burst forth. The entire training hall that had been converted from an underground warehouse shook violently in that instant. It was as though a heavy pile driver had smashed into the ground. Countless dust particles flew up from the tatami mats and fluttered about in the air. That was because Huaichi's raised left foot had landed on the ground. Then his right foot landed. Another loud sound rang out, and two large holes appeared on the tatami mats. His feet had sunk deep into the ground, almost covering his calves. Exorcise evil and purify the earth. A sacred and solemn aura emanated from the framework. This was the perfect 4 waves. The preparations were complete. In that instant, a deep sound broke through the air. The white paper doll and Huaichi's arms raised and moved forward. The slow and heavy blow shattered the air, setting off a hurricane as it rushed forward. A series of low, muffled sounds rang out. As he moved forward step by step, his arms continued to push forward. A terrifying aura that could topple mountains and overturn seas spread out. Push hand. In just an instant, the palm that was pushing forward had already arrived in front of Tengbin. Separated by more than a meter, Tengbin was almost out of breath. It was difficult to breathe. Stop! 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 Tengbin had forgotten his previous mockery. He staggered back and roared in horror. The palm that was pushing forward stopped in front of his chest. 20 centimeters away, there was already a 5-fingered handprint on his soaked shirt. If he was hit by this push hand, he would die. Tengbin, who was drenched in sweat, stood rooted to the ground. His legs felt weak. Looking at Huaichi, who had returned to being autistic and uneasy, he felt like a ferocious beast hiding its face. He was completely out of breath. You're a sublimator? The white paper doll and Huaichi's arms nodded. Wait. This time, Tengbin waved his hand and took out his phone again. He walked to a corner and called Tanaka. He began to curse again. Why didn't you say so earlier? I told you a long time ago. That kid is very powerful, really powerful. But you were busy scolding him back then. Tanaka asked angrily. He grew up in Matsumoto Ozaki's dojo. Matsumoto Ozaki is the Matsumoto who almost became a yokozuna. If he wasn't a bastard and in urgent need of money, he would have gone to the Cloud Nation long ago. I introduced such a powerful person to you, but you still scolded me. Are you still human? The embarrassed Tengbin was scolded in return for 10 minutes. He even had a nod and bow to thank him. After hanging up the phone, he looked at Huaichi with a complicated expression. Do you really want to join Green Sun? Yes, I've already thought about it. Mr. Tanaka also advised me, but I need money. The white paper doll in Huaichi's arms raised his head. Through his bangs, one could feel the sincerity in his eyes. He said from the bottom of his heart, "I want to make money. The more money, the better." In the silence, Tengbin sighed helplessly and waved his hand. "I understand. I will report this to the higher-ups." "Huaichi, Samura-kun, do you have a place to stay in Kyoto?" Huaichi shook his head. "Then I'll stay in the Tengbin group for the time being. Don't worry, there will be a result soon." Tengbin put on his coat again and looked at the harmless, dark man beside him. He felt his heart skip a beat. Finally, he asked, "By the way, is it convenient for you to let me take a look at your characteristics? I can also give you a code name. You can't use your real name to work, right?" Characteristics were the marks that allowed people of mixed races to recognize each other. Huaichi was silent for a long time. He raised his hand and pressed down his messy hair, revealing the small horns that slightly protruded from both sides of his hair. "Are you a ghost?" Tengbin was taken aback and immediately understood. "No, ghosts generally can't control their own personalities. If you want to describe it, it's a bit like the Minotaurs. Because of this, everyone called me Tauren since I was young." Huaichi brushed his fringe and smiled at Tengbin. A handsome smile suddenly appeared on his pale and weak face. "So if you have a code name, just call me Tauren." He said so. Even the code name was as harmless as the person himself. The arrangements after that were nothing to write home about. After registering some detailed information, he was sent to a messy hotel in the inner circle of Dambois. He shared a messy room with 6 or 7 people. But for a mixed race, it was good enough that he didn't have to sleep on the streets. How could he ask for more? Tengbin also bought him a bedding and a wash basin. He also reminded him to look after his personal belongings. After all, his roommate's hands and feet were not necessarily clean. After watching Tengbin leave, he smiled at his roommates in a friendly and timid manner. Huaichi lay down on the bed and began to sleep. Just then, a cold voice sounded in his ears. "It seems that the infiltration mission was carried out smoothly?" "Who said it wasn't?" Huaisher's lips buzzed silently, and he sighed. Smelling the pungent second-hand smoke in the air and the sound of his roommates playing cards, the newly minted Mr. Tauren began to wonder. Did his style become strange again? And why was he always associated with traitors? It all started 3 days ago. When Huaisher rushed to Kyoto, before he even left the station, he was directly taken to the station of the Kyoto Astronomical Society by the students of the Ivory Tower waiting at the gate. To be exact, it was in a cell. About a month ago, a biology professor working in the Ivory Tower was secretly arrested because he was involved in the security of the present world. In fact, it wasn't a big deal. It was just an invitation for questioning. It was about some of Green Sun's recent movements and some clues they had tracked down. The people of the Astronomical Society didn't think that such a biology professor who focused on research would be involved. However, since the old professor was arrested, he didn't say a word. He refused to cooperate, refused to talk, and refused any legal aid, except for the initial request. He said, "I want to see the people of the Ivory Tower." This was one of the purposes of the Ingzhou Academic Exchange Team that hadn't been announced publicly. The person in charge of this matter was Mr. Isaac, the vice principal who led the team. He had to help clear the suspicion of this highly respected professor who had educated countless people and bring him back in one piece. Unfortunately, after seeing that it was the vice principal who came, Professor Miyamoto was disappointed. In the interrogation room, after seeing Isaac, he didn't hide his distrust and unhappiness at all. He said bluntly, "I want to see the principal. The principal's identity is sensitive, so it's impossible for him to come and see you. Professor Miyamoto, you can tell me anything. I can fully represent the Ivory Tower to guarantee your personal safety and privacy, but you must be honest about the part of the case." Professor Miyamoto fell silent again. Then, half an hour later, he made another request to the vice principal who could represent the Ivory Tower. He said, "I want to see Huaisher." Chapter 699. Huaisher was taken to Professor Miyamoto in a daze. He didn't even realize what was going on. Why me? Why me? He couldn't understand from the bottom of his heart. He looked at the haggard old man behind the glass and asked, "Professor Miyamoto, We haven't met before, have we? Why can't you talk to Mr. Isaac? To be honest, I don't trust Mr. Isaac because he's different from the principal. The white-haired Miyamoto, Genichiro, said, I've known Mr. Isaac for many years, and I've never doubted his character. I also believe from the bottom of my heart that he'll do whatever it takes to protect the ivory tower. But because of this, I can't trust him on things that don't involve the ivory tower. What about me? Can I trust him? Under the sharp gaze of the vice principal behind her, Huaishi's face turned green. Damn you, old man. You're trying to make things difficult for me in front of the leader. We've never met before. Why do you have to do this? Mr. Huaishi, I've heard about you. I know what you've done for my clansmen and my friends. I deeply admire you. Professor Miyamoto said in a low voice. Although it's ridiculous, I think if there's a second person in the ivory tower who could be trusted besides the principal, it must be you. No. You've been wrong from the beginning. Has Russell, that old bastard, ever had anything to do with the word integrity in his life? And why did you give me such a high evaluation? I've never done anything. So what do you like about me? Huaishi wanted to cry, but had no tears. Just tell me, and I'll change. Professor Miyamoto looked up meaningfully and glanced behind him. I believe that if it were Mr. Isaac, he would never make the decision to destroy the village of Dusk. Isaac didn't say anything. He was silent and indifferent. He didn't refute. Indeed, he would do anything to obtain the power of the Twilight Village for the Ivory Tower, but he would never destroy the huge energy source of the Twilight Village for so-called morals. Huaishi was speechless. A loud smack was heard. He raised his hand and slapped his face hard. He deeply felt the profound truth of all the idiots you've made in the past will find you in the future. Only God knew how long he had been hung up by the Ivy League because of this. The title of the #1 prodigal and moral *TCH in the entire realm could not be removed from his head. Just as he was about to refute and explain, he saw, behind the thick protective glass, the white-haired professor, Miyamoto Genichiro, who had taught for 40 years and was highly respected in the university, slowly stood up. He ignored the shackles on his legs and arms. He bent his waist and bowed solemnly. He bent his knees and knelt before the young man, who was less than a quarter of his age, to apologize. He took a seat under the soil. I'm sorry, Mr. Huaishi. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have involved you. The old man knelt on the ground and pleaded with a hoarse voice. But other than you, I can't think of anyone else who is willing to and can help me. Please. He lowered his head, coughed, and begged humbly, Please, help me. Help us. Huaishi was dumbfounded. When he subconsciously reached out to support him, his hands hit the glass of the interrogation room and triggered the alarm. The people in the monitoring room almost called the guards directly. When he was at a loss and wanted to comfort Professor Miyamoto, he lowered his head and saw the scaly marks on the back of his neck. Professor Miyamoto was a person with animal characteristics, or, to use the most common term, a hybrid. In the silence, Professor Miyamoto prostrated himself on the ground like a stone sculpture covered in cracks. Huaishi instantly lost her strength and collapsed into the chair. She rubbed the space between her eyebrows and couldn't help but sigh. So what's going on? Please at least let me see the records and files first. Isaac waved his hand behind him. Naturally, a commissioner from the Central Bureau brought up the situation of the case. Huaishi was still an official inspector and military officer within the Astronomy Association, so he at least had the authority to understand the situation of the case. When he saw the two big words on the title, the corners of his eyes could not help but twitch. Green Sunday. It was Green Sun again. Since his debut, he seemed to have been at odds with this organization. When he went out to apply for a job, he met a goldfish seller. When he made a friend, he was stabbed in the back. When he went out to do bad things, he met a smuggler from Green Sunday. Even when he was on the train, he met their commander who had absconded. It could be said that he had offended everyone from Xian Hai to Ingzhou and from the Earth to the border. The contradiction between the two sides was simply 360 degrees without a blind spot. According to the description of the file, in recent months, the frequency of Green Sun's activities in the Earth was so frequent that it made people's hair stand on end, especially in the Ingzhou area. Under the interference of various factors, The situation in several fixed hybrid gathering areas became more and more unstable. While the public security plummeted, there was a faint trend of losing control. All kinds of clues indicated that someone was colluding with the hybrids from all over the place to plan a riot, and among them, in the photo taken by the informant, there was a blurry silhouette that pointed to one of Professor Miyamoto's students. Huaisher breathed a sigh of relief. He thought it was something serious. His legs were still trembling. "Don't worry, it's just a small matter. It has nothing to do with you, Professor." Huaisher comforted him. "Besides, maybe it's just a look-alike. The photo is so blurry it might not be—" "No." His words were interrupted by Professor Miyamoto. The disheartened professor raised his eyes and calmly admitted, "That should be the Divine City itself. There's no mistake. The future of the Divine City. Male, 32 years old, geneticist, registered name, differentiation. As a hybrid born in the slums, he could be said to be talented and intelligent. Relying on a few incomplete textbooks, he was officially admitted to the Imperial University at the age of 13. Then, 2 years later, he became a scholar at the age of 15. If Martin had not broken his record later, he might have been the youngest person to become a scholar in recent decades. He could be called a prodigy. Huaisher, who was a poor student, was ashamed. If it were not for the Book of Destiny, he could not even speak a language other than Dongxiao language fluently. After becoming a scholar, the future of the Divine City did not slack off. He began to specialize in the field of gene expression and genetics, and his results were considerable. Unfortunately, compared to his talent, he was more famous for his radical political views on the rights of hybrids. Radical. He advocated using violent movements and revolutions to fight for the rights of hybrids, and expressed unusual dissatisfaction and disgust with the current conservative policies of the Directorate. Now it seemed that it was not unexpected that he was hanging out with Green Day. All along, Professor Miyamoto had been warned by various parties because of his radical views. But out of love for talent, he had never dealt with the Divine City in any way, nor did he restrict any of his budgets. Instead, in addition to teaching and experiments, he also advised him in life. There was a period of time when the two of them were like father and son. They cooperated seamlessly and produced many results. He is my best student. I originally hoped that he could inherit my mantle. I didn't expect him to be so irrational." The old Professor Miyamoto whispered softly, "No, now it seems that he has been disappointed in the current situation for a long time, right? It's only because of this old man's face that he has to pretend to be polite. Too stupid, the Divine City, too stupid. Why would he do such a thing?" Looking at the old man's haggard and numb appearance, Huaisher sighed with pity. "So, you hope that I can help you to change your student's mind? Now that things have come to this, I don't have the face to say that." Miyamoto raised his head, not only in self-mockery, but also helplessness. He smiled at Huaisher with difficulty, if the twitching of the corner of his mouth could be considered a smile. "Please kill him," he said, "before he hurts more people." Huaisher widened his eyes. A month ago, the future of the Divine City suddenly left without saying goodbye. At first, everyone thought that it was a disappearance and kidnapping. After all, the project he was working on now was of great value. If the Monopoly Group wanted to do something to their project, this was the best opportunity. Miyamoto Genichiro ran around everywhere, begging to be searched, but in the end, it was like throwing a stone into the sea. But in his heart, he still hoped that there was a chance. At least no corpse was found. At least this meant that at least he was still alive. It didn't matter that the research results were stolen. As long as the Divine City Lord was willing to cooperate, the people who knew the value of scholars would treat him well and generously. Right? With this unrealistic delusion, he spent a long month. When the inspector of the literature conference came to him that day, he finally understood what his missing student had done. He took away all the data and virus samples in the laboratory, violated the commandments of scholars, and trampled on the results of all the participants. Miyamoto slowly raised his head and said in a trembling voice, "If that's all, it's just that I was blind to entrust the wrong person." But what he wants to do is more excessive and cruel than this. Professor Miyamoto, Genichiro, Vice Principal Isaac, who had been listening silently in the corner, suddenly raised his eyes, and his expression became cold. Are you trying to say that the project that Divine City Lore took away is the one that you were working on recently? Miyamoto closed his eyes in despair. Only Huaisher looked around blankly, not understanding what had happened. Soon, the research results and data of Professor Miyamoto were placed in front of him. Single negative strand RNA virus. This was a type of virus that was artificially catalyzed by the immortal platform virus in a special environment under harsh conditions. However, it wasn't actually contagious, and the symptoms were so weak that it couldn't even be compared to the common cold. Other than a low fever that lasted for about 3 hours, it didn't pose any harm to humans. It was a tool, a new type of cell fusion inducer. You can imagine, it's like a welding torch. The vice principal explained concisely. 2 cells are welded together by artificial grafting. It's more efficient and convenient than all the previous tools, and it can even accomplish many things that could not be done before. If it succeeds, it will be an epic-making innovation, a miracle in biology. Huaisher's eyes widened. He was shocked, grafting and fusing cells at will. This was already close to the realm of the creator. If Miyamoto Genichiro could completely master this law and engrave it into the pillars of the Jinmeng realm, he could become a true creator. But the real value of this law was not in Miyamoto's eyes. Chapter 700. That was hope. For hybrids, it was a hope that couldn't be exchanged with 10,000 deaths. Admittedly, it was difficult to cure those with the beast trait. There was no cure. Unless they were reborn like the development period after sublimation, it was impossible to get rid of the aberration that had occurred before they were born. But if used properly, this brand new cell fusion inducer could become a precious cornerstone to continue the research and development of new types of biological agents, specific drugs targeted at beastified individuals. It could suppress the complications of the beast trait in all aspects, just like insulin for diabetics. It could alleviate and reduce the occurrence of various complications through injection. Even if it couldn't be cured, it could still greatly extend the average lifespan of the hybrids and reduce the suffering of the patients. This was the original sin of the beast trait. The continuous mutation brought about various complications. Almost 80% of the beast trait died from various diseases. If Professor Miyamoto could succeed, there was no doubt that the beast trait would usher in a new dawn of hope. For this, he had invested as much as 40 years and burned through an unknown amount of his budget. At the worst, even the Ivory Tower's capital flow would be strained. Russell's only condition for the investment was that the Ivory Tower's name was among the researchers. Other than that, he wouldn't even add a dime to the investment except for the necessary profits to maintain production. Just this point alone was enough for Miyamoto Genichiro to prostrate himself in gratitude to Russell. Originally, everything was going well. The premise was, if nothing happened. I won't explain the specific principles here. Isaac's expression was unprecedentedly ugly. You only need to know that it can combine any hybrid with the Abyss's virus at any time and turn a living person into a biological weapon. Huaisher was stunned for a long time. His legs and stomach trembled violently. He shuddered. Think about it. 10, 100, 1,000, or even tens of thousands of Huaisher's alternate accounts did not control their plague aura at all, casually spreading their poison all over the place. When the time came, how much damage would it cause? How many deaths would it cause? How many nightmares would this power cause after it was injected with the hybrid's hatred and prejudice against society? The balance would be completely broken. Every hybrid would become a potential source of infection and a tool of transmission. Before Huaisher could react, Mr. Isaac could no longer suppress his anger. The terrifying might of a fifth-order ascendant turned into steel, causing the air to freeze. The alarm in the room instantly sounded, and in front of him, the thick-tempered glass cracked like snowflakes. He waved his hand, causing the rapidly spreading alarm signals in the air and even the circuits to abruptly stop. It was isolated from the outside world. It even froze the time of the commissioner next to him. That face froze in shock for a moment. His thoughts stopped. "Miyamoto, what on earth are you thinking?" Isaac said coldly. "What do you take the ivory tower's reputation and position for? Why didn't you tell me about this earlier?" "To whom?" Behind the broken glass, the old man raised his head and asked in confusion. "Tell it to the people of Ingzhou? Don't you understand, Mr. Isaac? This country has had problems for a long time." He raised his voice and yelled at the man in front of him. "This country is sick. Don't tell me you haven't seen it. Discrimination, bullying, workplace strife, the government and the military, the Chinese and the commoners. Everyone has been abnormal for a long time. Here, discrimination is like breathing, engraved into their instincts. As long as they're different, they're their enemies. As long as they're different from others, they're original sins here. Even breathing is wrong. Don't you understand how lowly we hybrids are? Don't tell me the people of Ingzhou will save us. No, they won't. They've long wanted to find an opportunity to flatten the Donghua inner circle. The reason they haven't killed all the hybrids is because they lack a reason. Don't tell me I'm going to personally give the looming hall an excuse to kill my compatriots." Disregarding the great disparity in strength between them, the stooped old man glared at his superior in front of him with wide eyes. "When I was young, my father taught me a principle. As long as people want to live, they can live. Drinking sewage, eating garbage, even if they don't live like humans, it doesn't matter. But my mother told me that if you want people to die, they will die. As long as you abandon them, it's fine, just like what the Directorate of Administration did. There were so many people, Mr. Isaac, so many people who were struggling at death's door, hiding in places where light couldn't find them, fighting like dogs for a mouthful of food, prostituting themselves, selling their smiles, working hard, selling themselves and their children, selling everything that could be sold in order to survive, but they still couldn't survive. Except for life, they have nothing. But what's wrong with them? They just want to live. I'm also a hybrid. I can live until now because of their mercy and grace. Without them, there would be no me. I want to help them, but I can't do anything. I want ordinary people to live peacefully with them, but people on both sides only see me as a traitor. What should I do?" He couldn't indulge his pain like a student and choose violence. He could no longer use reason to restrain his impulses like in the past, to seek that glimmer of hope that had long been lost. After being seen as a traitor by his people, in order to protect his people, he chose to hide it and became a traitor of the ivory tower. Now, Miyamoto Genichiro had broken down in despair. Tears flowed down his old face as he begged the person in front of him, "If you want to kill, please kill me as well. I only beg you, after I die, you must find the sacred city. At least, don't let more people die because of this." In the silence, Isaac didn't speak. He wasn't angry, and his expression didn't even change. He just replied calmly, "Professor Miyamoto, this is not something that the ivory tower can get involved in. The Directorate of Administration won't allow us to intervene in the affairs of the present realm and the internal affairs of Ingzhou. I can't do anything about this." No matter how Miyamoto begged, how angry or pleading, his attitude didn't change at all. Even if the sky fell and the earth cracked, he would never let the ivory tower get involved in this kind of chaos that had no innocence to speak of. In a long silence, Miyamoto's body gradually collapsed. She knelt on the ground, numbly begging again and again. To Isaac, to Huaishir in front of her. "I beg you, Huaishir-kun, please help me." The old man's forehead rubbed against the glass shards on the ground, leaving streaks of blood. "I beg you. I will repay you. I will. I still have value to you. I. She was sobbing by the end of her sentence. Huaishir wanted to speak, but Isaac looked at him coldly. One hand pressed on his shoulder, restraining his overindulgent compassion. He closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and opened his mouth to speak. But he heard a voice from the side. "Don't worry. He will help you, Professor Miyamoto." Outside the slowly opening door, the smoking man looked at Huaishir and curled his lips in disdain. After all, he is the kind of person who is too nice. As long as you suffer in front of him, he won't be able to move. Even if he says he doesn't want to, he will quietly sneak into Domwa's inner circle tonight. However, you shouldn't knowingly break the law and cross the limits of the authority of the Central Bureau to have such a dangerous idea. Huaishirkin. He deliberately emphasized the pronunciation of his name as a warning. I didn't. Don't King talk nonsense. Huaishir subconsciously wanted to refute, but when he turned around and glared, he saw a pair of eyes that he hadn't seen for a long time and the usual cold expression. He couldn't help but gulp. He nodded his head like he was pounding garlic. Yes. That's right. I like to help people the most. Huaishir patted his chest loudly. Leave it to me. I will abide by the laws of the present realm and the rules of the Astronomical Society. I will be a useful inspector for the world. Very good. The visitor nodded and looked at the others in the room. Although I seem to have come at a bad time, the visiting time is over. Everyone, is it convenient for you to move to the conference room to discuss the following matters? After the long meeting ended, Huaishir couldn't help but yawn. In fact, he wasn't among the people in the meeting. What a joke. Who were the people in the meeting? The plenipotentiary, the vice-chancellor of the Ivory Tower, the special commissioner of the Central Bureau's decision room, the branch minister of the Ingzhou Bureau, and the people who were directly connected through the network were the highest-level person in charge of the decision room of the Central Bureau and the 3 curators of the overhead floor. There was no chance for a salted fish like Huaishir to appear in such a place. Therefore, he sat on the bench outside the whole time until the door opened. The vice-chancellor walked over with a gloomy expression. When he passed by Huaishir, he said indifferently, "Since you want to get involved, then you'd better behave yourself." Then he left in a huff. It was obvious that he was dissatisfied with Huaishir expressing his opinion without him, but he didn't stop or scare him. It could only be said that he was used to the vice-chancellor's secretary, who was the same as the vice-chancellor, and was prepared to clean up Huaishir's mess. This made Huaishir feel even more awkward and embarrassed. He nodded and bowed as he sent the vice-chancellor away, and then the branch minister and secretary of the Ingzhou Bureau. Finally, he looked at the special commissioner from the decision room. In her short hair that had become unusually neat after she cut it short, he felt that it was a pity. In the silent gaze, Huaishir couldn't help but sigh first. I think you must want to ask, why is it you again? Yes, that's right. Ai Ching looked at him and asked curiously, have you noticed that every time something is about to happen or cause trouble, you are the most active? Chapter 701. If he could, Huaishir really wanted to reply that this was the price of being good-looking, but he didn't dare to. I can only say that it's a long story. Huaishir waved his hand awkwardly and asked curiously, did this matter get out of hand? What do you think? Don't treat others like fools, Huaishir. Such a big matter has already happened for half a month. Can't the directorate find out if Miyamoto doesn't say anything? Before coming here, I just came out of Miyamoto's laboratory and completely sealed all the research data. Because of his concealment, so many people have been working overtime nonstop these days. If you ask me, this is already deliberately endangering the safety of the current realm. How are they going to deal with it? Is there a result? What else can they do? Ai Ching waved her hand in annoyance. The ivory tower protected him at all costs, but your principal directly stole the line and came in to interfere, making a scene and pleading for leniency on his behalf. In the end, they'll probably give him a strict inspection and a warning to eliminate hidden dangers, and he can't leave the current realm for the rest of his life and can't participate in political content. It won't hurt at all. Then, they'll leave a mess for me to deal with. Is it very serious? Nonsense. Ai Ching glared at him. This is already a major threat that involves all the special shifters, and it can even shake the stability of the current realm. The Directorate has designated this as a key observation and investigation matter. If it's done well, it's reasonable. But if it's not done well, there will be severe punishment. If we don't think of a way, I'm afraid I'll be the one to take the blame in the end. Huaishir was stunned for a long time and sighed sincerely. It's not easy for you either. Who says so? Ai Ching responded coldly. In the sudden silence, Huaisher scratched his head and couldn't help but ask, "Have you eaten?" "Yes, the bento from the station. Not to mention the taste, at least it's filling." "What a coincidence, me too." Huaisher thought for a while and asked tentatively, "Then let's go for a drink." As he spoke, he raised his head and looked at the night outside the corridor, at the city lit up with red and green lights. Half an hour later, on an outdoor chair outside the Tiger King Hall chain milk tea shop, Huaisher, who had just returned from the line, happily put down 2 cups of milk tea and said, "Sorry, the line was too long. You've been waiting for a long time. Come and try it. It's an internet celebrity milk tea. It's worth the wait." Ai Ching coldly lowered her head and looked at the cup of milk tea in front of her. Then she looked up at Huaisher and said expressionlessly, "You brought me here to drink this? What else?" Huaisher asked in confusion. "Drinking is bad for the stomach. Look, isn't milk tea good? Even the underworld is selling it." Ai Ching rolled her eyes and ignored him. She actually expected this guy to have the courage to take her to a bar. She felt that there must be something wrong with her brain. "All right, it's my fault, but there's nothing wrong with drinking less, right?" Huaisher sighed, shrugged, and asked softly, "Long time no see. How'd you been?" "Not bad. I eat well and sleep well. I've been promoted and got a raise. I'm reaching the peak of my life." Ai Ching took a sip of milk tea and frowned because of the sugar. "I can't compare to you. Young, beautiful, and in the prime of your life. Not only am I a role model, but I'm also about to have a child." Putting down the milk tea, she asked, "Have you thought of a name?" What's with this feeling of guilt of a heartless man facing his ex-girlfriend? Huaisher's expression twitched. Being stared at by those indifferent eyes, he felt a little creeped out. He could only put his hands together and beg for mercy. "I was wrong. Let's not talk about this anymore, okay? This is what happens when you offend the people of the Abyss Development Bureau. Those guys have a lot of connections. Once there's any gossip or embarrassing thing, it will definitely spread everywhere. You should pay more attention to it." Ai Ching averted her gaze and looked elsewhere, not saying another word. The awkward silence hit again. In the silence, there was only the strange sound of the straw of the milk tea. Gurgle, 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 gurgle. Huaisher wanted to open his mouth several times to find some topics, but he was disturbed by these messy sounds. He couldn't hide his anger and turn around to glare. However, he found that there was no one beside him. There was only the window of the milk tea shop and the illusory scene in the glass. The black bird, which he hadn't seen in a long time, was leaning on the window frame, admiring the wonderful 8 o'clock show in front of it with anticipation. Its wings were wrapped around a can of milk tea of the same height, with a straw in its mouth. Slurp, slurp, slurp. Then gurgle, 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 gurgle. When it noticed that he was looking over, it even seemed to be waving its wings in dissatisfaction. It meant to tell him not to be distracted and to continue. How rare was the scene of a resentful couple reuniting. Big Sister Crows loved to watch this. In an instant, he lost all his mood. Huaisher couldn't help but roll his eyes and sigh. "I'm so difficult." Immediately, a puzzled gaze fell on Huaisher's face. Ai Ching tilted her head and asked seriously, "Mr. Huaisher, I can understand that drinking tea with a woman who doesn't understand the modern world is a very boring thing, but you don't have to be so miserable, right?" I'm not, don't talk nonsense." Huaisher widened his eyes and quickly grabbed the milk tea in front of him and took 2 big sips. "Who said that? I love milk tea the most. I have 3 cups every day." Ai Ching didn't say anything. She looked at his face silently, as if she was trying to distinguish whether he was lying or not. After a long time, she nodded slightly. "Is that so?" Yes, that's right." Huaisher nodded vigorously. "Then why are you still rolling your eyes?" Ai Ching asked in confusion. "It's because I haven't had enough." Huaisher slapped his thigh, then picked up his milk tea and gulped it down. He angrily scolded the unscrupulous shop. "Only this much for an extra large cup? How stingy. Do you still want to drink?" Ai Ching asked. Huaisher nodded crazily. Therefore, Ai Ching raised her hand and pushed her cup in front of Huaisher. she said considerately, then drink more. This Huaisha froze in place, dumbfounded. He lowered his head and looked at the milk tea that was still steaming with double pearls and the straw on it. There was a faint red mark on it. Don't you drink it? It's okay. I'm on a diet recently. It's enough to taste it. AI Ching smiled gently. You're welcome, please. In the silence, Huaisha looked down at the milk tea in front of him and swallowed his saliva. He felt a chill, a premonition of death. It was just a cup of milk tea. Why did he feel that if he didn't drink it, he would die? It was hard to understand, but his intuition was frantically warning him. If he chose the wrong place, he would be finished. In the end, under his expectant and gentle gaze, Huaisha squeezed out a smile with much difficulty. Then I won't stand on ceremony. With trembling fingers, he picked up the milk tea that AI Ching handed over. Then he pulled out the straw in his cup, inserted another hole, and took a deep breath. After sucking everything in the cup in one breath, he put down the cup. Feeling that the sense of crisis was gradually leaving, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Only then did he feel that the thick sweetness remaining in his throat was spreading, and finally, it brought a burst of bitter taste. It was so boring. You're sweating a lot, AI Ching said. It's hot. Huaisha coughed dryly, and his eyes drifted. This milk tea is really high in calories. You're right not to drink it. It's too bad for your figure. AI Ching shook her head and didn't want to embarrass him anymore. She put a glass of lemonade with ice in front of him. Don't worry, drink it. I didn't touch this cup. She said, try to learn from this lesson. Next time, if you want to bring someone to a discussion, don't go to a place like a milk tea shop to cheat female high school students. It's my fault. Huaisha raised his hands in surrender and shrugged. I just thought that you might be more relaxed this way. In the silence, AI Ching raised her head and looked around. Under the last dim light of the evening sun, the shop window lit up with a soft light, illuminating the surrounding pedestrians and their light smiles. Behind a table not far away, girls who had found a place to study after class were chatting and laughing softly. They held milk tea and gossiped about their school hunks and boyfriends between physics and algebra. The sound of music sounded in the distance. It was different from the laughter soaked in alcohol in nightclubs and bars. It was a lively scene that couldn't be seen in the eternally cold and silent decision-making room. Those calm and expressionless faces had never had so many heartfelt smiles. After a long silence, AI Ching slowly looked away and shook her head slightly. That's not necessary. Why sure? She looked at his blank face and told him, I'm already very relaxed. Then, she took out a piece of paper from her pocket and put it in front of Why sure. Since the tea is finished, I should go back to work. However, if you still don't give up and are determined to get involved in this matter, report here tomorrow morning. I won't wait for you if you're late. You're leaving? Why sure urged her to stay. Aren't you going to have dinner? I just found a restaurant nearby with good ratings. To avoid stomach pain and excessive heat, forget it. AI Ching glanced at Huai Sure meaningfully and turned to leave. Huai Sure was left alone in the same place, not understanding what she meant. Hatue's scumbag. A voice filled with righteous indignation came from the side. You hurt her heart. Huai Sure was furious and glared at him. What heartless thing did I do again? You're heartless because you didn't do anything, and you just rolled your eyes at her. Tongyi scolded him with disappointment. At that time, you should have jumped on her, hugged her, lifted her chin, looked in her eyes, told her that you missed her very much, and that you didn't want her to go, and then kissed her fiercely, and then she would kick you in the balls? What kind of overbearing CEO drama is this? Huaisha rolled her eyes again. She glanced sideways at the way she was bouncing around. Also, why do you always appear from strange places? Look at what you're saying. Isn't this the love from a big sister? Tongyi jumped on his shoulder and raised her wings to pat his head. I feel that as your contractor, my presence has been a little weak recently. In order to relieve your pain of lovesickness, I've decided to appear from time to time in the future to comfort your heart that has been hurt by this cruel world. Come, do you want to drink milk tea? It's for you. Before Huaisha could react, she directly stuffed the straw into his mouth. As a result, the cup had already been emptied by the black-hearted woman, Not even a pearl was left, just like his empty account balance. Huaisher felt that his heart had been hurt again. Tears flowed out uncontrollably. Chapter 702. After Huaisher wiped away his tears in the wind and rain, he realized that at least he still had a dream, and his mood calmed down a little. Tongji then continued unhurriedly. Actually, I think this matter can be considered. What is it? Of course it's about what Miyamoto said. Tongji said, although it's a little tricky, isn't it pretty good? How is it good? It's good that you don't neglect your work and private matters. Tongji flapped her wings and reminded him. Have you forgotten the most important prerequisite of Great Si Ming's transformation ritual? This is an opportunity that has come knocking on your door. If you don't seize it, you can only go to the border or wait until the end of the year. Huaisher was stunned for a moment, and then he understood. The ritual that Tongji had specially designed for him. Within 3 levels, a young Si Ming would transform into a Great Si Ming. What was necessary was the strengthening of divinity, a vessel that could replace Huaisher and bear the burden of hell's erosion, which was the divine mark called Motoko, and a large number of deaths. Great Si Ming, who ruled over death, could only be born from a large number of deaths, from a ghost to a young Si Ming, from death to life, then from a young Si Ming to a Great Si Ming, from life to death. The beginning and the end intertwined, forming an inner circle like a Mobius loop. A large number of people died, and a large number of consciousnesses dissipated. To be precise, death would begin to happen frequently and in large numbers in a short period of time. Moreover, it would be best if it had something to do with Huaisher. The most convenient way was undoubtedly to start a massacre. Huaisher froze on the spot, in disbelief. You want me to kill those innocent people with the characteristics of a beast? Hey, you're heartless. Huaisher, what are you thinking in that head of yours? Tongji also stared at him in disbelief. Silly boy, humans can't, at least they shouldn't. Aren't you the one who started this? Huaisher raised his guard. What are you thinking? Tongji sighed helplessly. She raised her little wings and wrapped them around Huaisher's neck. She leaned over and asked, use your brain. In the whole world, other than our good friend the rancher, is there any other charity organization that would be as generous as Green Day? How could there be someone as easy to kill as Green Sun? No more, right? You're Green Sun's nemesis, Huaisher. You're the official fighter of the Directorate of Defense, the future of Asia. Don't you feel embarrassed if you don't show off your traditional skills? Huaisher was stunned for a long time. He felt that what she said made sense. In any case, he didn't have a good impression of the people who started the riot. If he had to say something, he wouldn't have any qualms killing those bastards like the future of God City, who pushed their entire race to the edge of a cliff for revenge. However, what made him suspicious was something else. Is that all? What else? Tongji rolled her eyes. In the past, you didn't even hesitate to give that damn Baldy his hair tonic. This is a life and death grudge. Why are you so scared now that I've asked you to do something to your subordinates? Huaisher rubbed his chin. He suddenly had a bad feeling. I don't think it's that simple. Then, it didn't take long for this matter to become more complicated. To be precise, Huaisher sensed that something was wrong the next morning. He arrived at the address given by A.I. Ching early in the morning. It was a high-end apartment. When he took the private elevator upstairs, he found that the entire first floor had been transformed into a temporary command center. In the bustling commercial district of the capital, no one noticed that the Directorate of Defense had quietly hammered a nail into their coffin. As soon as Huaisher entered the door, he was pushed into the changing room. All his clothes were taken off, and he was only in his underwear. A few old men and women walked around him a few times to check him out. The few of them exchanged a few words in professional terms in a low voice before returning to their respective posts. Then, like a dead pig on the assembly line in a canning factory, it was plucked, marinated, fried, and stuffed into a can. Huaisher was put into all kinds of machines for examination. Blood tests, CT scans, and MRI scans. After the whole set, all the doctors began to wonder how he had survived until now. According to the analysis of other doctors, 70% of his bones have been broken before. Some have even been broken more than 3 times. He has suffered more than a dozen deep corrosion, and there are signs of being cursed. The number of times is quite shocking. Also, most importantly, we should lock up this nuclear bomb before the hybrid turns into a biological weapon. The doctor in charge of the examination stood beside the printer. He took out a steady stream of new papers and piled them in front of AI Ching. The pile of records was almost 8 or 9 centimeters high, and it was still increasing. It was a list of viruses and toxins in Huaishi's body. It was like a Chinese New Year in hell, and a strange demon went on stage to perform dish name for everyone. If he wasn't a member of the Astronomical Association, the local department would have sounded the alarm just by taking 2 steps in the present world. Sending such a genius to solve the biohazard crisis was like throwing incendiary bombs at the scene of a fire. As long as I burn them all first, they won't be able to burn anymore. So, he doubted from the bottom of his heart. Was this guy really reliable? Don't worry, everything will continue. Huaishi's safety is guaranteed by the decision-making room and the ivory tower. You can state the truth in the report, and I'll sign it. AI Ching casually glanced at the list of viruses that was still coming out of the printer. She waved at Huaishi and pointed to the chair-shaped operating table beside her. She motioned for him to lie down. Huaishi felt like there were 100,000 children in his mind. They all had a lot of question marks, but he didn't know which one to ask first. Lying on the operating table, he turned his head and saw the open organ preservation box and the 2 bone horns that were the length of the knuckle of the little finger inside. What is this? A prop for disguise. It has inherited the bone conduction communication function, GPS, and a bunch of other stuff. Next, it will be attached to your skull through surgery. Don't worry, it won't be disfigured. Before Huaishi could ask what was the purpose of the sticker, he noticed another person standing next to the surgeon. His eyes widened in disbelief. Who the F***CK is that? Tony. AI Ching looked back at the man in the horse-face mask. Isn't he your old acquaintance? You should have met before, right? Tony waved at Huaishi happily. Then why is he holding a pair of scissors? Because he wants to cut your hair and redesign your new image. With the sound of the scissors opening and closing, AI Ching handed over a stack of documents. The process will take about 3 hours. Take this. You can take a look at it in the middle. What's this? Huaishi felt that he was already stupid. He didn't want to ask anything. He just wanted to open his mouth and drool. And then, in the next period of time, you need to remember and memorize your identity information. Even if you talk in your sleep, you can't reveal it. AI Ching said, as an action member and registered military officer of the Astronomy Association, now we need you to find an opportunity to infiltrate Green Sun and look for clues. Wait. Huaishi finally reacted. Isn't that being a traitor? If possible, I hope you can use the word undercover. What's the difference? Of course, traitor or traitor is usually used to describe a rebel in a team. But you have already rebelled before you even joined the team. Look, isn't this not even close to being a traitor? Are you serious? No, I'm afraid you'll be too nervous, so I'm just joking. AI Ching lowered her head and looked down at him with a calm face that had never changed. She asked softly, do you feel much more relaxed? Yes, it's too easy for me. Huaishi nodded frantically, afraid that something bad would happen to him if he was late. Then, his head was pressed down by Tony again. He was designing a hairstyle. This type of customer is really difficult to deal with. It seems that any style is very suitable. Tony's hand was rubbing the big scissors. He looked up and asked, what kind of feeling do you want? My stomach hasn't been feeling well recently. It's best if you can cut it to the extent that I can't recognize it. As for the image, a spy doesn't have to pay attention to any image. Be more rustic and don't attract too much attention. Let's not talk about why you want to cut my hair because of your stomach, but why do these big scissors always aim at my face and want to cut it? Huaishi was so scared that his face turned green. Therefore, it was good to have a higher level of fantasy in the world. A frost giant stylist cutting young Master Ming's hair. No one would dare to write this on Zhongyan Web. AI Ching was like a dragon that had been prepared long ago. She was just waiting for him to take the bait and then quickly started the process. She couldn't wait for him to enter the rhythm of green sun tonight. Is there need to be so anxious? Huaishir asked, isn't this too fast? Yes, it has to be fast. After all, time waits for no man. Guess how much time that old man Miyamoto has wasted by deliberately hiding it from us? AI Ching was admiring the way Huaishir cut her hair. She lit a cigarette and said, it's too late now. There's no time for us to use the usual methods to slowly investigate. We have to take the risk, Huaishir sighed faintly. I'm that soldier, right? He actually wanted to say that it was easy for her to not find a boyfriend if she went on like this, but he didn't dare. The premonition of death was beating wildly, reminding him not to court death. Feeling Huaishir's resentful gaze, AI Ching gave a rare explanation. Don't worry, it's not just you. Even within the Central Bureau, we are just an independent investigation team. There are many people who don't want this turmoil to happen. Besides you, there are more people active in the Kyoto area now, hoping to contain this disaster. She paused and shrugged slightly. It's just that everyone may not get along well with each other. Huaishir understood what she meant. Everyone was competitors. Even if they were in different departments of the same company, there was still performance competition. The legal department wasn't human, the business department didn't do anything, and the human resources and finance department were riding on their necks. Didn't the business have to continue? He just hoped that when the time came, there wouldn't be something unpleasant for everyone. Huaishir sighed, looked at the information in his hand, and began to get into character. 2 hours later, he raised his head and looked at himself in the mirror. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.